Chapter 520. The Bloodridge Continent. Master, my ancestors live here? Lin Kuei looked at Chu Bei, a puzzled look on his face. This was an extremely tall mountain peak that seemed to pierce through the heavens. Its upper half was like a heavy sword, and at the top of the sword-shaped mountain peak, clouds swirled around it. Stonesword Mountain. This was the symbol of the Indigo Prefecture. Rumble. Suddenly, a series of explosions rang out from afar. Soon, multiple figures appeared within Chu Bei and Linley's field of vision. What powerful ripples! Master, they are fighting. In the air above Stonesword Mountain, Linley's attention was immediately drawn to the battle that was drawing closer and closer. Looking over, he saw dozens of figures being hunted down by 3 white-robed men. Based on this trend, in at most half a month, your 4 Divine Beasts clan will completely disappear from this world. Give up. Don't even think about escaping. The 3 white-robed men surrounded the dozens of figures while laughing loudly. These 3 white-robed men all had the same characteristics. They all had long golden hair and violet eyebrows. As they flashed through the air, every so often, figures would fall from the encirclement. Master, did you hear that? That group of people is from the 4 Divine Beasts clan. Linley said to Chu Bei, split up and flee. After the leader of the 4 Divine Beasts clan gave the order, the group of people immediately began to flee in every direction. You won't be able to escape. Today, all of you will die. A cold, calm voice rang out, and on the backs of the 3 white-robed men, a pair of golden wings that were 10 meters long suddenly appeared. This pair of enormous golden wings emanated a hazy golden light, and a holy aura emanated from them. Right at this moment, with the 3 white-robed men at the center, an enormous golden prison of light was formed, sealing off the escape routes of the 4 Divine Beasts clan. Damn! 10,000 years ago, when the 8 great clans saw us, all they could do was flee. I didn't expect that we would fall into their hands. After their escape route was sealed off, the 4 Divine Beasts clan once more gathered together, all of them staring fixedly at the 3 white-robed men, their faces filled with unwillingness. They were all gods, but the 3 pursuing them were all high gods. The difference between high gods and gods wasn't something that numbers could make up for. Die. A cold voice rang out from within the prison. Crack. However, just as the 3 white-robed men were about to slaughter to their heart's content, the golden light prison seemed to receive a terrifying pressure from the outside. Amidst a crisp sound, the golden light prison shattered and turned into nothingness. Who are you? The 3 white-robed men frowned as they stared coldly at Chu Bei and Linley, who had suddenly appeared. Their faces were gloomy, and their eyes were filled with killing intent. You must be the little fellows from the Black Tortoise clan. Chu Bei ignored the 3 white-robed men. Instead, he looked at the group of people being chased and spoke calmly. May I ask who you are? Compared to the white-robed man, the members of the 4 Divine Beasts clan were clearly much more respectful. How dare you meddle in the affairs of the Bar family? Are you tired of living? Noticing Chu Bei's attitude towards the Black Tortoise clan, the 3 white-robed men's faces darkened and they moved at the same time. Bang! However, before the 3 white-robed men's attacks could land on Chu Bei's body, a large golden palm print appeared out of thin air. It swept across and smashed the 3 white-robed men into smithereens, causing their souls to dissipate as well. Dead. In that instant, the gods of the Black Tortoise clan were all stunned. They stared at Chu Bei in a daze, as though they were looking at a freak. These 3 white-robed men were 3 high gods of the Bar clan, but they had been killed by this person in front of them with the flick of a finger, as though it was as easy as blowing off dust. My lord, you are? The members of the Black Tortoise clan recovered from their shock, and when they once more faced Chu Bei, they became rather cautious. This person's methods had truly frightened them. I have come this time to bring my disciple back to the clan, and he just so happens to be a descendant of the Azure Dragon of your 4 Divine Beasts. Chu Bei glanced at the nearby Linley. Actually, strictly speaking, Linley's ancestor was nothing more than someone who had been fused with the essence blood of the Azure Dragon. To tell you the truth, my lord, our 4 Divine Beasts clan isn't in a good situation right now. If he truly is a descendant of the Azure Dragon clan, then we might as well let him continue to follow you. While we haven't been discovered, let's hurry up and leave. One of them said respectfully, no matter. Just bring me to the Azure Dragon clan for a chat. Chu Bei laughed calmly. Then we'll do as you say, my lord. As they spoke, the group of gods of the Black Tortoise clan bowed towards Chu Bei, then led the way. As they chatted, Chu Bei gained a better understanding of the Four Divine Beasts clan. The Four Divine Beasts clan consisted of the Azure Dragon clan, the Redding clan, the Vermilion Bird clan, the Nemo clan, the White Tiger clan, the Lios clan, and the Black Tortoise clan, the Bowen clan. 10,000 years ago, the Four Divine Beasts clan had been led by the Azure Dragon clan, the Redding clan. They had spread throughout the 4 higher planes and the 7 divine elemental planes. Because the Four Divine Beasts clan had 4 sovereigns, over the course of countless years, the Four Divine Beasts clan had been extremely arrogant. Precisely because of this, in their battles against the other clans, they were extremely domineering. But ever since 10,000 years ago, when the 4 sovereigns of the Four Divine Beasts clan had been slain, their crisis had come. Those clans which had once been at odds with the Four Divine Beasts clan had begun to consciously ally together. Amongst them, 8 clans were the most powerful, and they were the main force behind the attack on the Four Divine Beasts clan. The 3 white-robed figures Chu Bei had killed earlier were one of the 8 great clans, the Bear clan of the Celestial Realm. In order to reduce the number of casualties, ever since then, the forces of the Four Divine Beasts clan, which had spread throughout the various planes, began to pull back, retreating to their headquarters in the Infernal Realm. Despite that, however, they still weren't able to escape the pursuit of the 8 great clans. In fact, these clans didn't hesitate to leave more than half of their supreme experts in the Infernal Realm, all for the sake of completely annihilating the Four Divine Beasts clan. At first, the Four Divine Beasts clan had the protection of the Bloodridge Sovereign, and so the 8 great clans were rather wary of them. But 1,000 years ago, when the patriarch of the Bear clan of the Celestial Realm acquired a sovereign spark and became a sovereign, the 8 great clans no longer had anything to fear from the Bloodridge Sovereign. From that moment onwards, the Four Divine Beasts clan had fallen into a state of true danger. The Four Divine Beasts clan fought against the 8 great clans. One bloody battle after another unfolded within the primordial chaos sea. And in recent days, the Four Divine Beasts and the 8 great clans had begun their final battle. Up until now, this battle had yet to come to an end. My lord, this is the territory of the Redding clan. A god of the Bowen clan steadied himself, then said respectfully to Chu Bei. In front of them, there was an enormous coiling dragon that was 10,000 kilometers long, coiling through the mountains. But of course, this wasn't a true dragon. It was just a divine statue. Boss, your ancestors' clan's aura is truly terrifying. BB stood on Linley's shoulders, his mouth wide open, a look of disbelief on his face. Linley was completely stunned by this scene as well. The 10,000-kilometer-long divine statue coiled through the mountains, and the various castles and mansions surrounded it, forming a perfect whole. Bowen, Char, how come you have the time to come visit me? Just as the leader of the Bowen clan led Chu Bei to land on the Wide Dragon Path, a sturdy figure flew over. Not long after, several more people appeared behind him. At this moment, there were thousands of gods seated in the meditative position around the Dragon Avenue. Their bodies were covered with wounds, and they were enduring the pain as they healed their wounds. They were all warriors who had been heavily injured in the battle of the primordial chaos sea and had the chance to come back and heal. I brought you here, my lord, while he brought his disciple to acknowledge him as an ancestor. Bowen first pointed at Chu Bei, then pointed at Linley. Acknowledge him as an ancestor? All of the branches of our Redding clan retreated 3,000 years ago. How could there still be clansmen stranded outside? The muscular man of the Redding clan glanced at Linley, frowning. Why don't you use your dragon form to prove your identity? The draconic blood in my body isn't concentrated enough. I'm unable to dragon form. Linley bit his lip, a hint of embarrassment in his eyes. If you can't dragon form, how can you prove that you are a member of our Redding clan? The muscular man's face was rather ugly to behold. Disciple, dragon form. Right at this moment, Bei spoke out. Linley was startled at first, but he quickly understood what Bei meant. He wanted him to use the power of the ancestral dragon pills. Swish. As Linley nodded, a dazzling golden light rose up, and then a draconic roar rang out, echoing through the world. This dragon form, what's going on? And this draconic aura, how is this possible? In the next moment, a 5-clawed golden dragon appeared in mid-air. Right at this moment, all of the gods of the Redding clan who were healing around the Dragon Avenue were startled. What kind of dragon is this? Around the Dragon Avenue, the thousands of gods of the Redding clan stared in shock at the 5-clawed golden dragon that Linley had transformed into. All of them were completely astonished, and a look of disbelief was in their eyes. They could sense that Linley's aura was merely that of a warrior of the 9th rank, but the draconic aura he emanated after dragon form was firmly suppressing the azure dragon blood in their bodies. This had nothing to do with one's level of cultivation. This was an instinctive suppression. This sort of feeling was as though the azure dragon power in their bodies was bowing down before this 5-clawed golden dragon. Kid, is this dragon form of yours a mutation? A god flew over to Linley's side. It should be. Understanding the meaning in Bei's gaze, Linley nodded towards the god. Might I ask which material plane you are from? The god asked. The Yulon continent. Linley replied. What? Can it be that you are from the weakest branch of the Baruch clan? Hearing Linley's reply, the gods all revealed looks of disbelief. Weakest? Linley frowned. Exactly. In the battle against the 8 great clans, 80% of the other clans have been mobilized. Only your clan has no gods. No one is qualified to participate in the battle. Yet another god flew over to Linley. Given your excellent mutated bloodline, if you were given 10,000 years, you would definitely become a powerful high god and bring glory to your Baruch clan. Unfortunately, the battle is nearing its end. Perhaps our 4 divine beasts clan will truly perish. Ta Feng, don't say such depressing words. The battle isn't over yet. The first muscular man spoke out. Take them to Baruch's clan for now. Hey, come with me. The god named Ta Feng glanced sideways at Linley and then at Bei. After letting out a quiet sigh, he flew towards the northwest. Chapter 521. Lord Ta Feng, what brings you here today? Just as Ta Feng led Bei and Linley to land in a valley within the Baruch clan's territory, dozens of figures flew over at high speed from afar. The leader of the group was dressed in a sleeveless shirt that accentuated his muscular chest. His dark brown hair was disheveled, and his eyes shone with a sharp light. Baruch, I didn't expect you to have such an outstanding descendant. Ta Feng didn't hesitate to tease the leader. So he is Baruch, the founder of my Baruch clan? My ancestor. Hearing Ta Feng's words, Linley turned to look at the leader. His heart felt as though it had been struck by a giant hammer. Lord Ta Feng, what do you mean by this? Baruch's face was filled with surprise. This kid came from the Yulon continent. He says he is from your Baruch clan. Ta Feng pointed at Linley. From the Yulon continent. Baruch was startled, and then a look of wild joy appeared on his face. But he quickly calmed down. Looking at Linley, he coughed twice. Kid, if you are a member of my Baruch clan, you should know about the ancestral records regarding your ancestors, right? Of course I do. Hearing Baruch's words, Linley immediately nodded solemnly. And then, he said, Baruch, the first dragonblood warrior of the Yulon continent. In the year 4560 of the Yulon calendar, Baruch fought against a black dragon and a titanic frost WIRM at the gates of Linan City. In the end, he slew both the titanic frost WIRM and the black dragon, causing his name to shake the world. In the year 4579 of the Yulon calendar. Good. Hearing Linley recount one record after another, Baruch excitedly said good 3 times in a row, and then took Linley into his arms. Child, welcome home. After laughing loudly, Baruch pulled out a clan badge from his clothes. Child, this is the proof that you are a member of the Redding clan. Drip a drop of blood on it and acknowledge your ancestors. Linley accepted the badge. Without hesitating at all, he immediately dripped a drop of blood onto the badge. A short while later, Through the badge, he could sense the aura of the other clansmen. Linley has successfully acknowledged his ancestors. The host's mission is half complete. Right at this moment, the system's voice rang out in Chu Bei's mind. Lord Afong, who is this? Baruch's gaze fell upon Chu Bei, a puzzled look in his eyes. This? Ta Feng stared blankly at Chu Bei, not knowing how to introduce him. His attention had been on Linley from the very beginning. He had even forgotten to ask the Black Tortoise clan about this person's background. Buzz buzz. Suddenly, the awkward atmosphere was broken by the deafening sound of a horn. Following the sound of the bugle horn, the entire Skyrite Mountains began to tremble. One divine rainbow after another shot into the skies from every corner of the mountain range, their roars shaking the heavens and the earth. Fight! The moment he heard the sound of the bugle horn, Ta Feng roared. His aura rose to its peak as he soared into the air and flew towards the southeast. Has the final battle begun? I really want to fight alongside you. Kill everyone from the 8 great clans. Staring at the tens of thousands of divine rainbows flying past the mountain range, Baruch, Hainman, and the other experts of the draconic bloodline from the Yulon continent clenched their fists. They shook their heads and sighed, their faces filled with hatred and resentment. Ancestor, what's with this horn? What's going on? Lord Ta Feng and those clansmen in the sky, where have they gone? Linley stared at the skies, frowning, a puzzled look in his eyes. This is the war horn of our 4 divine beasts clan. Once it is blown, it means that all of the gods and above of our 4 divine beasts clan, regardless of whether they are injured or not, must step onto the battlefield to kill our enemies. Baruch stared towards the southeast, his eyes bloodshot. This war horn is only blown at the final moment. It seems as though our 4 divine beasts clan is in a disadvantageous situation. I'm afraid we are in grave danger. If the sovereigns of our 4 divine beasts clan hadn't died, how could we be in such a dangerous situation? Although the sovereigns of our 4 divine beasts are all demigod sovereigns, once the 4 of them unleash a fusion technique, they are comparable to chief sovereigns. Hainman took a deep breath. As the second clan leader of the Baruch clan, 100 years ago, he had just become a demigod. Given his power on the battlefield, he wouldn't even be considered cannon fodder, much less kill. The 2 of you, follow me. When the second war horn is blown, we will quickly flee the Skyrite Mountains. And then, we will find a plain to hide in. We can't let the 4 divine beasts clan be wiped out. Baruch shook his head and sighed. But as soon as the words came out of his mouth, a surge of mysterious power swept through his entire body. And then, Baruch felt the scene in front of him change. When he could once more clearly see everything around him, his pupils instantly contracted. Not just Baruch. Hainman, Tuoz, Nibel, and the other experts from the Yulon continent all revealed looks of astonishment on their faces. They all stared blankly downwards, numb as though they were made of wood. Unbeknownst to them, they had already been taken away from their homeland by that mysterious power, and they had arrived at the battlefield of the Sea of Chaos. Master, why did you bring the ancestor and the others here? Linley's words instantly shocked Baruch, Hainman, and the others, causing them to turn their gazes towards Chu Bei. Their mouths were wide open, filled with disbelief. The 4 higher planes, the infernal realm, it had 5 major continents. They were the Redbud continent, the Carol continent, the Muja continent, the Bloodridge continent, and the Jadefloat continent. These 5 continents formed a ring, and within the ring was a vast, boundless sea known as the Sea of Chaos. In terms of surface area, even the largest of the 5 continents, the Muja continent, wasn't even a tenth of its size. At this moment, above the waters of the Bloodridge continent, an incomparably fierce battle was taking place. The blue waters of the sea, because of the influx of fresh blood, had already begun to turn dark red. As the waves crashed against each other, the air was filled with a pungent, fishy smell. The battlefield was divided into 2 factions. One faction was the 4 Divine Beasts clan, led by the Azure Dragon Lei Ding. The other faction was the 8 Great Clans, led by Baal of the Celestial Realm. Rumble. Amidst the tragic battle, One figure after another fell from the sky and smashed into the sea. Countless corpses were carried away by the waves. It was a shocking sight. On this battlefield, although the 4 clan leaders of the 4 Divine Beast clan had all reached the level of High God Paragon, the leaders of the 8 great clans were all High God Paragons as well. Because of the disparity in the number of supreme experts, this battle was clearly unbalanced. From the looks of it, the 4 Divine Beast clan was in an extremely bad situation. In terms of numbers, both high gods and gods clearly outnumbered the 8 great clans. If it wasn't for the fact that the 4 Divine Beasts clans' defenses were powerful enough, this end war probably would have ended long ago. Despite that, however, having dragged on for so long, the battle was nearing its end. At the very top of the battlefield, there were 3 figures with terrifying auras hovering there. One of them stood by himself. He glanced downwards at the battlefield, his face growing increasingly solemn. As for the other 2, they stood side by side, a hint of a smile at the corners of their mouths. Ball, can it be that you really want to wipe us all out? The Bloodridge sovereign stared coldly at one of the 2 figures, a middle-aged man with a pair of golden wings on his back. 10,000 years ago, after the sovereign of the 4 Divine Beast clan had died, he had been entrusted with protecting the descendants of the 4 Divine Beast clan. At first, the 8 great clans did indeed fear him, and so they only launched small-scale battles. But who would have imagined that one of the 8 great clans, the former patriarch of the Ball clan, would suddenly acquire a sovereign spark and become a sovereign as well? If that was all there was to it, he wouldn't be as unconcerned as he was right now. However, when the enemy had launched the end war, they had actually invited another sovereign to assist them. Even he, facing 2 sovereigns at the same time, didn't feel certain of victory. Bloodridge, don't meddle in other people's business. The battle against the 4 Divine Beasts clan didn't take place on your Bloodridge continent. What's more, Ball and I didn't interfere. We just allowed those little fellows to battle it out. We were already giving you a lot of face. Sovereign Luke, by Baal's side, spoke out. He was a sovereign of the life realm. Because he owed Ball a favor, he had agreed to help out. That fellow, Beirut, asked me to watch over the 4 Divine Beasts clan. The Bloodridge sovereign swept Ball and Luke with his gaze, then spoke out once more. Beirut? Hearing this name, a hint of astonishment flashed through Baal's eyes, but he quickly regained his composure. So what if it is him? Do you think I'd still be afraid of him? In addition, would his true body dare to leave the Yulon continent? Hearing this, the Bloodridge sovereign shook his head. Even an additional Beirut wouldn't be able to change the situation. The 4 of them were all lesser sovereigns, and their power was fairly close. Even if he joined forces with Beirut, they might not necessarily be able to defeat Ball and Luke. Chapter 522. The Battlefield. The Northwest. Baruch, Hainman, and the other Dragonblood warriors from the Yulon continent stared down at the battle below. All of them had gaping mouths, looks of disbelief on their faces. It was you who brought us here. Baruch recovered from his stupor. Linley's words echoed in his ears. Taking a deep breath, he turned his gaze to Chu Bei. Not just him. Hainman, Sakajo, Juk, and the other Dragonblood warriors were all staring fixedly at Chu Bei. Clearly, they had also been shocked by Chu Bei's abilities. Previously, they had been planning on how to safely flee the Skyrite Mountains and thus leave behind their bloodline for their clan. Who would have imagined that before they could flee, this mysterious person of unknown origin had brought them to the battlefield above the Sea of Chaos? All of this happened in the blink of an eye. Chu Bei glanced calmly at Baruch, but didn't say anything. His gaze continued to fall upon the battlefield, and a hint of a smile appeared at the corner of his lips. Kill them all. Even if we die in battle, we won't retreat. Within the Skyrite Mountains, more and more figures were joining the battle. 80% of them were warriors who had returned from the battlefield after being heavily injured, but upon hearing the sound of the bugle horn, they joined the battle despite their injuries. But even though the 4 Divine Beast clan had nearly 10,000 warriors joining the battle, they still weren't able to make up for the difference in numbers between them and the 8 great clans. Right now, the 4 Divine Beast clan had been completely surrounded by the experts of the 8 great clans. In addition, as more and more people died, the encirclement was constantly shrinking. Odinbell, let's see how long you can hold on for. Right now, we have Sovereigns Bar and Luke on our side. Don't count on Bloodridge to save you. Today, your 4 divine beasts clan shall disappear from the face of the infernal realm. The leaders of the 8 great clans all let out cold laughs. Rumble, however, just as their smug words came out, a heaven-shaking explosion rang out from the battlefield. In the next instant, an enormous beam of golden light descended from the heavens, completely surrounding the 4 divine beasts clan, which had been surrounded by the 8 great clans. Bang! 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 Right at this moment, those members of the 8 great clans who had been attacking the warriors of the 4 divine beasts clan, but had ended up landing on the dazzling light, all of them seemed to have been struck by some sort of invisible, terrifying force. They were instantly knocked flying backwards. Among those figures that were sent flying, there was no lack of high-level deities. Even the 2 clan leaders of the 8 great clans, who had reached the level of a high-level deity, could not escape the fate of being sent flying. Can it be that the Bloodridge Sovereign has intervened? Does he not fear Lord Godbar and Lord God Luke at all? The 2 patriarchs who had been knocked flying, after stabilizing themselves, immediately turned their gazes towards the Bloodridge Sovereign. It wasn't just the 2 of them. Almost at the same time, all the experts on the battlefield turned their heads to look. Even though the enemy has 2 sovereigns supporting them, the Bloodridge Sovereign still hasn't given up on us? The tens of thousands of warriors of the 4 divine beasts clan stared at the golden light which had suddenly descended from the heavens and surrounded them. When they once more looked towards the Bloodridge Sovereign, their eyes were filled with deep gratitude. The 2 sovereigns, Bar and Luke, frowned in the instant that the golden light appeared, because they knew that the person who had intervened wasn't Bloodridge. Who is it? Bar and Luke both called out at the same time, turning their heads to look around. Their divine sense was stretched to the maximum, but they didn't discover anything unusual. It wasn't just the 2 of them. Bloodridge was also looking around, as though he was searching for something. Can it be that this barrier of light protecting us wasn't created by the Bloodridge Sovereign? Then who could it be? For someone to be able to send a high god paragon flying, it has to be a sovereign. There are only so many sovereigns. Who could it be? Can it be that they owe our ancestor a favor? Seeing that our 4 divine beasts clan is in danger, they intervened? Hearing the voices of Bar and Luke, as well as the rather confused look on Bloodridge's face, the warriors of the 4 divine beasts clan seemed to have guessed that the person who had intervened wasn't Bloodridge. All of them revealed looks of astonishment and confusion. In this battlefield, aside from Bloodridge, they truly couldn't think of anyone else who would intervene and help their 4 divine beasts clan at a time like this. After all, this meant that they were standing in opposition to both Bar and Luke, 2 sovereigns. As they saw it, the person who had intervened in secret had to have owed their ancestor a favor. Otherwise, why would he intervene? Lightning evasion. With a loud shout, the patriarchs of the 8 great clans from the divine plane of lightning attacked. They transformed into streaks of lightning, tearing through space as they smashed against the dazzling golden light surrounding the warriors of the 4 divine beasts clan. Boom! With a low, muffled sound, the golden light merely rippled out from the point of collision. As for the patriarch of the lightning clan, he was knocked flying backwards, spitting out a mouthful of blood as his face turned ashen. Patriarch, as long as we stay here, we'll be safe. Even a full force blow from a paragon is unable to break through it. Looking at the heavily injured patriarch of the lightning clan, the warriors of the 4 divine beasts clan revealed looks of joy. Bar, what are you trying to do? Didn't we agree not to interfere? Sensing the ripples in Bar's aura, Bloodridge frowned. That agreement was based on the premise that no sovereigns would intervene. But right now, that hidden person is clearly doing the same thing as us. Naturally, that agreement is no longer valid. Bar stared coldly at the battlefield, a terrifying ripple of energy emanating from his right palm. Hearing Bar's words, the faces of the warriors of the 4 divine beasts clan instantly changed. If Bar were to intervene, no matter how astonishing the defensive power of this golden barrier was, it probably wouldn't be able to withstand it. After all, the opponent was a sovereign. Slash. Right at this moment, Bar attacked. A blue blade of light pierced through the air from his palm, instantly landing on the barrier of light. Everywhere it passed, a terrifying shockwave sliced apart the sea of chaos below. Clang. However, to everyone's astonishment, when that blue blade of light, condensed with Sovereign's might, smashed against the barrier of light, the result was no different from a high god's attack. It merely caused a few ripples, then was instantly rebounded. Boom. Staring at the rebounding blue blade of light, Bar immediately raised his hand to meet it. But the energy contained within the blade of light seemed to have been strengthened, and it actually knocked him back. How can this be? Even Sovereign Bar is unable to do anything to this barrier of light? It must be because Sovereign Bar didn't use his full strength. If Sovereign Bar had used his full strength, this barrier of light would have instantly shattered. Watching as Bar was knocked back, the faces of the members of the 8 great clans all changed, revealing looks of disbelief. Chapter 5:23. It can even block the attack of a sovereign? As they stared at the dazzling golden beam of light that was completely undamaged, then thought back to how Bar had attacked earlier. The experts of the 4 Divine Beasts clan recovered from their daze, and then all of them took deep breaths. Only looks of astonishment remained on their faces. Who is it? What's the point of hiding like a coward? Bar once more roared, but this time, his expression was clearly a bit more sinister, and his roar was filled with anger. Bloodridge and Luke didn't say anything. They just continued to stare at their surroundings, sensing the auras hidden in the air around them. Listen to my advice. Let's forget about the enmity between the 8 great clans and the 4 Divine Beasts clan. Right at this moment, a majestic, dignified voice rang out from above the sea of chaos, clearly entering the ears of everyone present. As the voice rang out, Chu Bei appeared on the battlefield, leading Linli in. Behind him was a group of Baruch, Hainman, and the others. It's him. Haha, so it's his lordship. Just as Chu Bei appeared on the battlefield, 2 different cries of surprise rang out from the 4 Divine Beasts clan, surrounded by the golden beam of light. The first cry of surprise came from the Azure Dragon clan's Redding clan. The second cry of surprise came from the Black Tortoise clan's Bowen clan. Ta Feng, you know this, Lord? The patriarch of the Azure Dragon clan immediately asked. Baigu, what's going on? The Black Tortoise clan's Bowen clan immediately asked as well. Lord Patriarch, I haven't had a chance to tell you yet. Yet another descendant of the Baruch clan of the Yulon continent has arrived. His name is Linli, and not long ago, he successfully acknowledged his ancestry. As for that person, he came with Linli. He seems to be Linli's master. Ta Feng immediately replied to the patriarch of the Azure Dragon clan. Lord Patriarch, earlier, when we were being pursued by 3 high gods of the Bar clan, it was him who rescued us and killed those 3 high gods. In addition, his disciple seems to be a member of the Redding clan. The Black Tortoise descendant named Baigu immediately replied. Hearing the response of their descendant, the 2 clan leaders exchanged glances. For a moment, they didn't know what to say. They just looked at Chu Bei with incomparable respect. Who are you? He actually dares to interfere in the matters between our 8 great clans and the 4 Divine Beasts clan. After sizing up Chu Bei, Bar stretched out his hand and pointed at the golden light beam not far away. If revenge breeds revenge, will there ever be an end to it? In the future, you 2 should mind your own business, Chu Bei said, smiling at Bar with his hands behind his back. Why have I never seen you before? Luke flew to Bar's side and looked at Chu Bei with confusion. Judging from the other party's methods, it was obvious that he was not a perfect high-level deity. However, there were only so many core gods, and he had never heard of the existence of such a person. You've only lived for a few eras. Isn't it normal that you haven't seen me before? Chu Bei glanced at Luke. Now, I don't care who you are. If you dare to meddle in my business, you will be going against me. Bar glared at Chu Bei coldly and snorted. The primal chaos sea below him started to churn, and huge waves rushed into the clouds. It wasn't easy for you to train. Leave now. I will protect the four divine beasts clan. Don't do anything that you will regret. Chu Bei sighed while speaking in a threatening tone. Arrogant words. Hearing Chu Bei's words, Bar's face immediately changed, and a murderous look appeared in his eyes. A cold, sinister voice rang out, and a jade-green long sword appeared in Bar's hands. This was a sovereign artifact. Wielding the jade-green longsword, Bar didn't hesitate at all as he charged towards Chu Bei, stabbing out with his sword towards Chu Bei's head. Instantly, the long sword, filled with sovereign's might, emanated a terrifying sword light. Rumble! The sword stabbed out, causing the heavens to shatter and the seas to roar. Is this the might of a sovereign? Too terrifying. The members of the Four Divine Beasts clan revealed looks of terror as they stared blankly towards the front. In the instant that Bar struck out with his sword, the flow of divine power in their bodies had suddenly slowed down for some reason, making it difficult for them to use it. This bit of strength is far from enough. However, in the face of this incomparably terrifying sword strike, Chu Bei seemed extremely calm and collected. There was no fear on his face at all, and there was even a disdainful smile at the corners of his lips. In reality, this was indeed the case. The aura emanating from a lesser sovereign like Bar, in the perfect world, was roughly equivalent to the peak of the self-release realm. He was still a bit away from the autarch level. As for Chu Bei, without using the power of the system, his personal level of cultivation was already at the peak of level 17, equivalent to the autarch level in the perfect world. An autarch against a self-release realm expert. What difference was there between this and playing around? Clang! Chu Bei flicked out with a finger, and a sword of light flew out from his fingertip. It slashed out in a beautiful arc, easily blocking Bar's jade-green long sword. Instantly, Bar's body came to a halt, and then he frowned. The jade-green long sword in his hands trembled, and layer after layer of terrifying power spread out from the sword. Pooh! Bar, who was somewhat caught off guard, found it difficult to disperse the wave-like power. His body suddenly trembled, and beads of blood seeped out. He also spat out a large mouthful of blood. In the next moment, Bar was sent flying. The space within 1,000 kilometers completely collapsed, and a terrifyingly large hole appeared. Bar himself was directly smashed into the spatial turbulence. Terrifying shockwaves spread out, and the sea of chaos below directly boiled. All the creatures in the sea died, instantly turning into dust. Not a single trace of them was left behind. How is this possible? How can Sovereign Bar be at a disadvantage? Bar must have underestimated his opponent. The warriors of the 8 great clans looked at the hole in the sky that was filled with spatial turbulence. Their pupils all constricted, and their expressions were extremely ugly. On the contrary, the warriors of the Four Divine Beasts clan revealed excited expressions, looking at Chu Bei's figure in admiration. They didn't dare to imagine that a seemingly casual attack from the other party had actually sent Ball flying. Luke Ku, if you want to fight as well, then let me exchange a few blows with you. Sensing that Lu Ku's aura was rising, Bloodridge let out a cold laugh. Haha, that won't be necessary. Lu Ku restrained his aura, as though he had sensed something. He said, perhaps Bar alone will be able to deal with this fellow of unknown origins. Rumble. Just as Lu Ku's words came out, an enormous rift suddenly appeared above Chu Bei's head. Within the rift, dark clouds roiled about, and lightning flashed everywhere. Bar, who had been smashed into the spatial turbulence, appeared once more. However, the jade-green long sword in his hands had been replaced by a javelin that was surrounded by a large amount of lightning. This was also a sovereign artifact, and an extremely powerful lightning-style sovereign artifact. Swish! Bar descended from the skies, his gaze cold. He threw out the javelin in his hands, the tip of the javelin striking straight towards Chu Bei's head. Everywhere it passed, there was only a faint ripple of energy. Clearly, the attack power of the javelin had already reached its limit. You really are stubborn. Right at this moment, the smile on Chu Bei's face vanished, replaced by a gloomy look. He spat out 6 cold, emotionless syllables from his mouth, like the sound of thunder from the 9 heavens. echoing through the skies. And then, without even raising his head, he swung his hand towards the air above his head. With a wave of his hand, his arm was covered with a layer of golden draconic scales. Rumble, Chu Bei's fist smashed against the javelin. With an explosive sound, the javelin instantly shattered into countless fragments that flew everywhere. Chapter 524. Not good. The sovereign Godbar seemed to sense danger. An inexplicable chill surged through his heart, and his expression changed dramatically. However, by the time he wanted to flee, it was already too late. Chu Bei's fist rumbled through the air. After shattering the javelin, it instantly appeared in front of Bar. Bar's pupils constricted. His body had been forcibly restrained by the mysterious power of that fist, and he could only watch as that scale-covered fist landed on his chest. Bang! Bar's chest was instantly pierced through, and his originally wild and powerful aura instantly fell to rock bottom. You want to steal my divine spark? Even if I die, I'll take you with me. Bar first let out a miserable cry of agony as he watched that hand reach into his body to take away his divine spark. Then, he began to roar wildly. In the next moment, all the veins on Bar's body bulged as the surrounding elemental energy surged into his body like a torrential river. More accurately, it was within his divine spark. In the face of absolute power, self-detonation is nothing more than a joke. As his calm voice rang out, Chu Bei slapped out with his other hand. It rapidly expanded and instantly enveloped Bar's body. Right at this moment, Bar's body swelled to the limit and began to split apart. Bar had successfully self-detonated. However, there was no earth-shattering explosion as everyone had expected, nor was there any terrifying phenomenon. It was as though the giant hand had stopped firing. There was only an incomparably low, muffled sound. Then, under countless gazes, the giant hand opened, and a pile of scattered flesh fell down towards the chaos sea below. At the same time, a crystal that glowed with jade-green light flew towards Chu Bei. Dead. Bar is dead. Impossible. He's a sovereign. Where did this person come from? How could he have killed Bar? Seeing that pile of flesh that had yet to completely dissipate, the warriors of the 8 great clans' originally high fighting spirit immediately collapsed. All of them sat down in midair, paralyzed. They could not believe what they had just seen. Chief Godbar was dead. Their greatest pillar of support was gone. Bar is dead. Bar is dead. The warriors of the 4 Divine Beasts clan recovered from their stupor. They were all extremely excited, and they all bowed towards Chu Bei, their eyes filled with gratitude. Why, you're an intermediate chief god. Lu Ku came to his senses and looked at Chu Bei again with a gaze filled with dread. At the same time, Lu Ku made up his mind. Once he left, he would immediately report this matter to the 4 sovereigns of the laws. In the many planes, the sovereigns had an agreement. There were 3 ranks of sovereigns. If the lower-ranked sovereigns didn't offend the higher-ranked sovereigns, the higher-ranked sovereigns weren't allowed to slaughter the lower-ranked sovereigns. Only sovereigns of the same level of power were allowed to battle each other. If a chief god were to violate the rules, they would be jointly punished by the chief sovereigns of the 4 laws. From the looks of it, this middle-ranked chief god who had appeared out of nowhere had first interfered with the lesser chief god's affairs. This was a violation of the rules. Chu Bei glanced disdainfully at Lu Ku, paying no attention to this terrified lesser sovereign. He then turned to face the warriors of the 4 Divine Beasts clan behind him. With a flick of his finger, a clear clang sound could be heard. The dazzling golden light surrounding the warriors of the 4 Divine Beasts clan shattered and vanished. Thank you, my lord, for saving our 4 clans from this calamity. The patriarchs of the 4 Divine Beasts clan immediately knelt down towards Chu Bei, their faces filled with deep gratitude. Although they didn't know who this person in front of them was, nor had they ever heard of such a figure amongst the sovereigns, this person had definitely killed Sovereign Bar and saved them. Thank you, my lord, for saving our lives. Immediately after the 4 patriarchs, the tens of thousands of warriors, including Baruch, Hainman, and the others, all knelt down as well. Their unified voices shook the entire infernal realm. Rise, all of you. I only did this out of convenience for the sake of my disciple." As his calm words came out, Chu Bei waved his hand, and a jade-green crystal landed in front of the patriarch of the Azure Dragon Redding clan. "This is a sovereign spark." Sensing the aura emanating from the jade-green crystal, the patriarchs of the Four Divine Beasts clan almost immediately confirmed its identity. Looks of astonishment appeared on their faces. "My lord, what is this?" Redding Bell stared rather nervously at the sovereign spark in front of him. It was precisely because he had some guesses that he was so nervous. "This thing is of no use to me. I'll give it to you." Chu Bei crossed his arms in front of his chest as he spoke casually. "Thank you, my lord." Now that his guesses had been confirmed, Redding Bell immediately revealed a look of unconcealable excitement. If he became a sovereign, why would he need to fear the 8 great clans? But just as he was planning how to take revenge on the 8 great clans after he became a sovereign, that mysterious person who had given him the sovereign spark seemed to have read his mind. I said before that the battle between the 8 great clans and the Four Divine Beasts clan is to come to an end. In the future, each of you will mind your own business. Under the circumstances that the 8 great clans did not provoke you, if you dare to take the initiative to attack the 8 great clans, don't blame me for taking back the sovereign spark. Cold in the forest's voice rang in his ears. Then, when he met Chu Bei's icy gaze, Redding Bell immediately shivered. Clenching the sovereign spark in his hand, he hurriedly said, "I'll do as you say, my lord." Hearing Chu Bei's words, the surrounding warriors of the 8 great clans immediately let out a long sigh of relief. It was as if a huge rock had been lifted from their hearts. Xiefeng and Luke, who had been watching the battle from the side, couldn't help but be greatly shocked when they saw Chu Bei casually toss the sovereign spark he had taken from Ball to Redding Bell. That was a little too extravagant. That was a chief god's divine core, a supreme treasure that could create a chief god. However, such a supreme treasure was nothing special in the eyes of the other party. "Stop hiding in the shadows. The battle is already over. All of you, go back to wherever you came from." As Chu Bei's voice rang out, the warriors of the Four Divine Beasts clan and the 8 great clans all followed Chu Bei's gaze and looked towards the empty space in front of them. Ripples spread out, and yet another 5 figures walked out. One of them was the Redbud Sovereign. Aside from the Chief Sovereign, all of the other sovereigns of the Infernal Realm have been alerted. Upon seeing the appearance of the 5 figures, the warriors of the Four Divine Beasts clan all revealed looks of shock. The Redbud Sovereign nodded to the Bloodridge Sovereign, then stepped forward and clasped her fists in greeting towards Chu Bei, a strange look in her eyes. Ever since this person had instantly left the Redbud continent, she had suspected that he was a sovereign as well. However, she hadn't expected that this person would actually be an intermediate sovereign. After the Redbud Sovereign and the Bloodridge Sovereign greeted each other, the other sovereigns all nodded towards Chu Bei in greeting. They could be considered to have greeted each other. A short while later, in the air above the Sea of Chaos, countless figures dispersed and flew off in different directions. Chapter 525. Skyrite Mountains. Azure Dragon's Redding Clan. "My lord, you are leaving just like that? Aren't you going to stay for a few more days?" Redding Bell had successfully fused with a sovereign spark and was now a sovereign. Despite that, he was still incomparably respectful towards Chu Bei. Chu Bei shook his head. "This disciple of mine had a father who died many years ago. It is time to bring him back to life." "Bring back the dead? Master, you said that my father can be brought back to life, just like how you brought back Bibi's father." Hearing Chu Bei's words, Redding Bell and Linley both revealed looks of astonishment, especially Redding Bell, who was both surprised and overjoyed. Their natures are different. Bibi's father died not too long ago, and his soul has just entered the netherworld. I am still able to gather his soul, but your father died many years ago. Even I, as your master, have to make a trip to the netherworld. Chu Bei looked at Linley as he spoke calmly. "Netherworld?" Linley frowned. As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Bei led him away from the infernal realm. "The 4 higher planes. The celestial realm. Lord Orloff, you have to help us get justice." A sovereign has gone against the agreement you made with the other three chief sovereigns of the edicts. Within an enormous, circular building that emanated a holy aura, Sovereign Luke was standing respectfully in front of a white-haired old man. This white-haired old man was the most powerful expert of the celestial realm, the chief sovereign of fate. What happened? Orloff stroked his beard, frowning as he stared at Sovereign Luke in front of him. Have you heard of Bar? Luke asked. A newly ascended sovereign. He can be considered a lucky fellow. The chief sovereign of fate nodded. He was killed by someone, by a god. We didn't offend this god at all. He was the one who interfered with our affairs first. Luke, who told Orloff about what had happened above the Sea of Chaos, embellishing his story. Who knew where Luke had gotten this information, but he actually knew that Chu Bei came from the Yulan continent and was the leader of a major organization. The owner of the All Heavens business? How strange. There clearly isn't such a person amongst the sovereigns, but he has the power of an intermediate sovereign. The chief sovereign of fate frowned, lost in thought. One of the four higher planes, the life realm. Lord Life Dominus, please punish that fellow who violated the agreement between the lords. This was a lord who was on good terms with Luke, and he was standing respectfully behind a black-clothed woman. If he really broke the rules as you said, then we will naturally give you an explanation, the woman in black said calmly. The infernal realm of the four higher planes. Lord Destruction Dominus, this is what happened. What do you think of this matter? In the depths of the Muja continent, a red-clothed man bowed to a man shrouded in black chi. Let's see what the other three have to say first. After all, this middle-rank sovereign can be said to have helped the Four Divine Beast clan, and the Four Divine Beast clan is in my territory. The Destruction Dominus sighed faintly. But if he really did violate the rules, I'm afraid I won't be able to protect him. The four higher planes, the netherworld. Haha, interesting, really interesting. After these endless years of boredom, something interesting has finally happened. In a gloomy castle, a pretty red-haired girl sat at the head of the table. Her face was filled with joy, as if she had yet to mature. Lord Death Dominus, since you already know about this matter, then I'll take my leave first. A lightning-type sovereign glanced at the pretty girl warily, then impatiently walked out of the castle. Hee, I really want to see what this middle-rank sovereign of unknown origins looks like. The red-haired girl rubbed her palms together, an expectant look on her face. It was also at this moment that a deep, forceful voice filled with majesty drifted out from the four higher planes and the seven elemental planes. Owner of the All Heavens shop, in 6 hours, come to the Sovereign Judgment platform for your trial. This voice seemed to contain boundless power. In an instant, it filled every corner of the various planes. This is the Fate Dominus voice. Owner of the All Heavens shop? Who's that? Why haven't I heard of him before? Sovereign Judgment platform? Could this owner of the All Heavens shop be a sovereign? And a sovereign who's made a mistake at that? Don't you know? The owner of the All Heavens shop is a middle-rank sovereign. He ignored the agreement the four sovereigns of laws made back then and killed a lesser sovereign, Bar, in the Chaos Sea of Hell. I've heard of Bar. Not long ago, he coincidentally obtained a sovereign divine core and became a sovereign. But why haven't I heard of this middle-rank sovereign, the owner of the All Heavens shop? After all, there are only so many sovereigns. Who cares so much? Hurry up and hurry to the Sovereign Judgment platform. If you're late, there won't be any seats in the front row. Do you think the owner of the All Heavens shop won't go? Impossible. No one has ever dared to go against the four sovereigns of laws. News of Chu Bei killing sovereign Godbar quickly spread throughout the various divine planes. The first to receive the news were naturally the four sovereigns of laws, followed by the other seven sovereigns. After that, it was the sovereigns, as well as higher, intermediate, and lesser sovereigns. At the same time that the news spread, tens of thousands of sovereigns headed for the Celestial Realm's Sovereign Judgment platform through interdimensional transportation portals. The Divine Plane of Light. The owner of the All Heavens shop? Is he the one who destroyed the Radiant Church of the Yulan continent? Atop an enormous jade boulder, the chief sovereign of light, Augusta, had a gloomy look on his face. Lord Chief Sovereign, do you think the 4 chief sovereigns of the edicts will sentence the owner of the all-heaven shop to death? A 12-winged angel stood respectfully next to Augusta. No matter what the 4 of them decide, the owner of the all-heaven shop must die. The chief sovereign of light narrowed his eyes, a murderous look in them. The higher plane of the infernal realm, the Skyrite Mountains. All of the high gods of the 4 divine beasts clan were gathered together, with the leaders of the 4 clans. Baal, what should we do? His lordship, for the sake of saving us, actually put himself in danger. If the 4 chief sovereigns of the edicts truly sentence him to death, what should we do? The Black Tortoise, Vermilion Bird, and White Tiger clan leaders all looked towards Reading Bell. Ever since Reading Bell had become a sovereign, he had become the leader of the 4 divine beasts clan. I am already a sovereign. Even in front of the 4 chief sovereigns of the edicts, I have a right to speak. During the trial, I will explain this matter in detail and beg the 4 chief sovereigns of the edicts to forgive you, your lordship. After speaking, Reading Bell looked towards the celestial realm. We'll go with you. With enough people, perhaps the chief sovereigns of the edicts will be lenient. The other 3 chief sovereigns and the other high gods all followed closely behind Reading Bell. Chapter 526. The Higher Planes. The Netherworld. The Sacred Undead Mountain. This was a mountain that was over 10,000 meters tall, completely covered in white bones. White bones could be seen everywhere on the mountain. At the peak of the mountain, there was an ancient, pitch-black castle that was shrouded in a black fog. In front of the ancient castle, there were 2 enormous teleportation arrays. The Eastern Teleportation Array was responsible for bringing people from other planes. Newcomers to the Netherworld from the material plane would all use this teleportation array. As for the Western Teleportation Array, it was responsible for sending people from the infernal realm to other planes. Usually, only a few people would step onto the teleportation portal in the West. However, today, there was a long queue, which was out of the norm. Not only that, but the auras of the people in the line were all incomparably powerful. The weakest was actually a god. These lords must be heading to the celestial realm. If only I had enough nether stones, that would be great. That way, I'd be able to go to the celestial realm's judgment platform and see what sort of person the owner of the all-heaven shop is. That's impossible in this lifetime. I'd best just obediently guide the newcomers. The demigods responsible for welcoming newcomers all stared at the gods and high gods in the line with envy. Master, they're all discussing you. Space rippled, and Linley stretched his body out, pointing at the gods below him as he spoke. Chu Bei chuckled. The chief sovereign of Fate's Roar had caused his reputation to increase quite a bit. Master, then do you want to go to the judgment platform? Based on what they're saying, the chief sovereigns of the edicts seem to be very powerful. How about, after you save my father, we go back to the Yulan continent? Linley spoke out once more, his words carrying a hint of worry. How could your master miss such a lively event? A playful look was on Chu Bei's face, and then he slapped his palm down towards the teleportation array. Rumble. With an enormous sound, the gods and high gods who had been waiting in line were all startled. They all raised their heads to look at Chu Bei. Who is it? The gods frowned. This teleportation array has already been modified by me. There's no need for you to wait in line. With a smile on his face, Chu Bei led Linley away, disappearing from the senses of the deities. Have any of you seen him? Also, is what he said just now true or false? Looking in the direction that Chu Bei had disappeared in, the gods all had doubtful looks on their faces. There's really no limit on the number of people that can be teleported. My God, who is he? He actually has such a method. Soon, shocked voices came from all around the teleportation array in front of the castle. Master, is this our destination? The abyssal mountain you spoke of? In the distant skies, Linley pointed towards the front, his voice excited. This was a towering mountain peak that was emitting a faint green light. At first glance, it looked like an azure mountain, but upon closer inspection, one would discover that the green light was constantly flashing and changing colors. Sometimes it was violet, sometimes it was blue, sometimes it was black. It was extremely bizarre. Not bad. This is the place. Chu Bei held his hands behind his back. As soon as he finished speaking, he led Linli into the Abyssal Mountain. The Abyssal Mountain. The #1 mountain in the Netherworld. It was 1,000,000 meters tall and had a circumference of more than 10,000 kilometers. As far as the eye could see, the Abyssal Mountain was surrounded by tricolored clouds, and the clouds naturally formed chains of heaven and earth wrapped around the mountain. Supposedly, the chains of heaven and earth could not be touched. Anyone who touched them would definitely die. Clang. With a casual wave of his hand, Chu Bei chopped apart the chains of heaven and earth, then led Linli into the depths of the Abyssal Mountain. Quick, look. More people are coming. Have the two of you come for the abyssal fruit as well? This mountain is filled with danger. Since fate has brought us together, why don't we travel together? Just as Chu Bei led Linli into a mountain forest, 3 men flew over, their eyes filled with caution. Mission 5 issued. The host has acquired the abyssal tree. Suddenly, the system's voice rang out in Chu Bei's mind. Friend, your power isn't what it seems on the surface, is it? Right at this moment, one of the 3 men, a seemingly feminine youth with shoulder-length silver hair, spoke out in a testing manner. He could sense that one of the two was a warrior of the 9th rank, while the other didn't even have any ripples of divine power at all. If it was as it seems on the surface, do you think we would have made it here alive? Chu Bei had a hint of a smile on his lips. That's true. Why don't we travel together? The silver-haired youth seemed to be the leader of the 3, and he once more extended an invitation. What is this abyssal fruit you spoke of earlier? Chu Bei sized up the 3 gods in front of him. Judging from their names, this was the abyssal tree in his side mission. Can it be that you didn't come for the abyssal fruit? The silver-haired youth's face changed. Not before, but now I am. Chu Bei's words carried a hint of amusement in them. Hearing this, the silver-haired youth pursed his lips. Forget it. There's no harm in telling you. The abyssal fruit is a supreme treasure of the Abyssal Mountain. Anyone who obtains the abyssal fruit and eats it will become a high god. At the same time, they will be welcomed by the sovereign and become a sovereign's emissary. Supposedly, this sovereign is the most powerful sovereign of the Netherworld, the chief sovereign of death. Chief sovereign of death? I seem to have an impression of that name. Hearing the silver-haired youth's words, Chu Bei's lips curved upwards. If the abyssal fruit is so powerful, then why are there so few people searching for it in the mountains? Let's not talk about how dangerous this mountain is. There aren't many people who dare to come here to begin with. What's more, 6 hours later, the 4 chief sovereigns of the edicts will judge the owner of the All-Heavens shop. We don't have enough abyssal coins, which is why we're here to try our luck. The silver-haired youth said. So that's how it is. Then do you know where the abyssal fruit is? The abyssal fruit is unpredictable and ephemeral, but supposedly, its energy ripples are. Before Linli and the silver-haired youth finished their conversation, the space around them began to ripple, and then the scene in front of them changed. Is that it? At this moment, Chu Bei's voice rang out. The silver-haired youth and his companions were first stunned, but when they saw where they were, their pupils contracted, and a look of astonishment appeared on their faces. They couldn't believe that in the space of a single breath, they had gone from the middle of the mountain to the peak. The Abyssal Mountain was very strange. At the middle of the mountain, there was a barrier which even ordinary high gods would find hard to break through. Because of this, very few people had ever reached the peak of the Abyssal Mountain. The silver-haired youth and his companions took a deep breath. Just as they calmed their excited hearts and looked towards the front, their faces once more twisted and even more exaggerated. Abyssal fruit. I'm not dreaming, am I? It really is the abyssal fruit. We found it. After letting out a cry of surprise, the silver-haired youth and his companions excitedly began to celebrate. Chapter 5:27. In front of them was a wide, empty area. In the center, there was a short tree with extremely lush branches. The tree was less than 30 meters tall, but its branches were so thick that even 2 grown men wouldn't be able to wrap their arms around it. Unlike its short height, it had tens of millions of branches, each of which was at least 100 or 200 meters long. On top of these extremely long branches, there were also many small branches sticking out from the side. This caused such a short tree to cover an area of several hundred meters around it. The most conspicuous thing was none other than the fist-sized purple fruits growing on the 3 large branches at the top of the tree crown. They were spherical in shape, and their surface was sparkling and translucent. They glowed with colorful light and emanated a blurry mist. "Master, I'll go pick the fruit. Don't be rash. This abyssal fruit is protected by a serpent spirit." Just as Linley was about to move, the faces of the silver-haired youth and the other 2 changed dramatically. But it was already too late. By the time they finished speaking, Linley had already arrived in front of the tree. Crackle, crackle, crackle. Just as Linley reached out with his hand, the branches and leaves of the tree began to tremble, as though they were being blown by a wind. In the next instant, tens of thousands of streaks of green light lit up. Looking carefully, they were palm-sized green snakes. This aura, flee. Staring at the dense cluster of green snakes and sensing the aura hidden within them, the faces of the silver-haired youth and the other 2 instantly revealed looks of terror. Any single one of these snakes had the aura of a demigod. If there were only a few dozen of them, that was one thing. The 3 of them, as gods, would be able to kill them. But there were tens of thousands of them. What are you standing there for? If you don't run now, it'll be too late. Forget about your disciple. He's dead for sure. Seeing that Chu Bei was still standing there, stunned, the silver-haired youth immediately shouted a warning. However, Chu Bei remained unmoved, a smile on his face the entire time. Linley, who had already appeared in front of the tree, stared at the dense cluster of green snakes and suddenly shivered. He turned around to look at Chu Bei. When he met Chu Bei's gaze, he seemed to regain his confidence. He pushed off the ground with his right foot and soared into the air, reaching out to grab the purple fruit. At almost the same time, those tens of thousands of green snakes with the power of a demigod flooded towards Linley. Just as the densely packed green snakes were about to overwhelm Linley, a pale yellow wall of light suddenly appeared in front of Linley. Chi, chi. Green smoke rose, and the tens of thousands of green snakes that landed on the wall of light were like moths to a flame, turning into ashes in an instant. All dead. How is this possible? The silver-haired young man and the other 2 who hadn't flown far away looked back and saw such a scene. They were immediately stunned and motionless. It seems that the Netherworld Mountain has welcomed a rather powerful fellow. At this moment, the short tree swayed and actually emitted a human voice. "Are you all here for the abyssal fruit?" As the soft voice rang out, an enormous face began to appear atop the trunk of the abyssal fruit tree, and the branches swayed, sending Linley flying backwards. That is, staring at the enormous face atop the trunk, the distant silver-haired youth and the other 2, as well as Linley, instantly revealed looks of astonishment. "Lord Sovereign, they killed 10 million of my descendants. I will kill them." At this moment, a sinister, low voice suddenly rang out, and then, with a hissing sound, 2 giant serpents that were more than 100 meters long appeared. One was golden, while the other was dark red. Their savage, bloody mouths made one's heart tremble. "What? Sovereign! Sovereign!" The silver-haired youth and the other 2 were first startled by the sudden appearance of these 2 giant serpents. After all, the aura emanating from these 2 serpents was simply too terrifying. Most likely, even amongst high gods, they were top-tier existences. But before they could recover from their shock, the way the 2 giant serpents addressed the abyssal fruit tree caused their hearts to tremble even more violently. They had come to harvest the abyssal fruit, and knew that the abyssal fruit was protected by the serpent spirits. But no matter what, they had never imagined that the abyssal fruit tree which grew the abyssal fruit was actually a sovereign. Fortunately, from the looks of it, this sovereign didn't seem to be a bloodthirsty person. Otherwise, with a single thought from him, they probably wouldn't even have bones remaining. "Lord Sovereign, forgive us for our offense. We will leave immediately." The silver-haired youth and the other 2 bowed towards the abyssal fruit tree, and then glanced towards Chu Bei and Linley. "You want to leave? You can be buried here forever." The giant golden serpent let out a cold laugh, and then with a slashing sound, it tore through the air, instantly blocking the path of the silver-haired youth and the other two. "No, don't." Staring at the savage, bloody maw that had suddenly appeared before them, the bodies of the three trembled violently. Instantly, looks of terror appeared on their faces. Boom. But just as the giant golden serpent was about to swallow the three of them whole, an enormous, rippling palm appeared out of nowhere, easily swatting the giant golden serpent away and disappearing into the horizon. In the next instant, the giant, dark red serpent's gaze focused on Chu Bei. Its bloody eyes were filled with disbelief, and at the same time, its killing intent grew even more intense. However, it didn't immediately attack Chu Bei. Instead, it looked towards the nearby abyssal fruit tree. "Who are you?" The gaze of the giant face on the trunk of the abyssal fruit tree was locked onto Chu Bei, a frown on its face. "You've stayed long enough in the abyssal mountain. Why don't you go somewhere else?" Chu Bei didn't answer the question of the abyssal fruit tree, instead asking a question of his own. "What do you mean by this?" The giant face on the trunk of the tree began to turn gloomy. "In the future, you can follow me." Chu Bei held his hands behind his back. As soon as he finished speaking with a smile, he took a single step and appeared in front of the abyssal fruit tree. And then, with a rumbling sound, an enormous, ancient tree appeared behind him. This was a strangely shaped, ancient tree that emanated an ancient aura. It had thousands upon thousands of fruits growing on it. The branches and leaves swayed, and amidst the rumbling sound, thousands of different colors began to appear in the air above the ancient tree, occasionally transforming into all sorts of different shapes. An extremely dense, refreshing aura emanated from the thousands upon thousands of fruits, filling the air above the abyssal mountain and transforming into a miraculous sight. This is the silver-haired youth's group of three, as well as the giant, dark red serpent, all stared in shock at the Bodhi tree behind Chu Bei. Before the silver-haired youth and the others could guess at the name of the Bodhi tree, yet another ancient tree appeared behind Chu Bei. It was the Path Understanding tree. Rumble. The two ancient trees moved in a formation, one in front and one behind. As their branches swayed, they surrounded the abyssal fruit tree. Right at this moment, the giant face on the trunk of the abyssal fruit tree seemed to sense danger, but before it could do anything, a miserable, agonized scream rang out from its mouth. Chapter 528. No, impossible. How could this be? Staring at the giant, twisted face within the trunk of the abyssal fruit tree, the dark red serpent was scared silly. It stood there in a daze, as though it had been petrified. The distant silver-haired youth and the other two were stunned as well. The three of them seemed to have lost their souls. Their mouths were wide open, and they were speechless. They didn't dare believe what they had just seen. That was a sovereign. Just like that, it had been attacked in a pincer attack by two other trees. Judging from its screams, it seemed to be suffering agonizing torment. Although not long ago, Linley had seen Chu Bei kill Sovereign Bar. Right now, his face was still filled with shock. Collect. As Chu Bei barked this single word, the Bodhi tree and the Epiphany tree simultaneously emitted an immortal light, and with a boom, they disappeared together with the abyssal fruit tree. The host has subdued the abyssal fruit tree. Mission complete. Hearing the system's voice, Chu Bei laughed calmly. Yet another ancient tree appeared in his sea of consciousness. To be precise, this was just a sapling, completely different from the previous abyssal fruit tree. The dark red serpent finally came to its senses. It stared at Chu Bei with incomparable terror. Then with a swoosh, it tore through the void and flew towards an ancient castle at the peak of the mountain. "My lord, that sovereign," the silver-haired youth and the other two flew back to Chu Bei's side, becoming incomparably cautious as they probingly asked about the abyssal fruit tree. "We are connected by destiny. These 3 fruits are for you." Chu Bei waved his hand, and the 3 abyssal fruits flew towards the silver-haired youth. The 3 were stunned, but after they came to their senses, they hurriedly bowed towards Chu Bei, their voices extremely excited. Thank you, my lord." But by the time they finished their thanks and raised their heads, Chubei and Linley had already disappeared. The abyssal mountain. The peak of the mountain. Within a gloomy castle, ripples appeared in the air, and two figures slowly descended. Master, this place is so sinister. As soon as Linley landed within the castle, he couldn't help but shiver, and a strange chill filled his heart. Looking around, the castle was made of purplish-black materials, and the cold walls emitted a bone-chilling aura. Chubei waved his sleeve, and a resplendent golden light instantly filled the ancient castle, and the gloomy chill disappeared. Linley felt a warm current spread through his entire body, making him feel extremely comfortable. "Who is it?" Suddenly, a cold and clear voice resounded through the castle. Linley and Bibi immediately looked towards the source of the sound, only to see that at the end of the violet carpet there was an exquisite throne. It was a pure black throne. A woman in a purple robe sat on the throne. The purple robe was embroidered with tree branches, vines, and silver snakes. She had blood-red hair and an exquisite face. Her eyes, in particular, seemed to carry a bolt of lightning that could shake one's soul. The sovereign of death is a woman. Staring at the red-haired beauty on the throne, Linley couldn't help but cry out in surprise. "How dare you? How dare you not kneel in front of the Lord Ruler?" Suddenly, a low shout rang out. So there were three figures standing on either side of the red-haired beauty. One of them, a white-haired man, heard Linley's words, and his face immediately sank. He waved his hand and struck out with a palm strike. His palm emanated a terrifying ripple of aura. Forget about Linley. Even a powerful high god who faced this palm would be scared witless. This was because the six figures by the red-haired woman's side were all netherworld sovereigns. Boom. Linley felt as though all the blood in his body had come to a halt, but just as the palm strike was about to land on his body, an enormous, rippling palm suddenly appeared in front of him. With a muffled sound, the enormous rippling palm destroyed the white-haired man's palm strike as easily as crushing dry wood. The enormous rippling palm continued forward, instantly arriving in front of the white-haired man. The white-haired man frowned, not hesitating at all as he clenched his fist to meet it. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The castle trembled, and a strange light swirled around the walls. The white-haired man was knocked flying backwards, smashing viciously against the walls. If it hadn't been for the swirling light, the entire castle probably would have been transformed into dust by that palm strike. In that instant, aside from the red-haired woman, the other sovereigns all revealed looks of astonishment. All of them stared in disbelief at Chubei. "Who are you, exactly?" The white-haired man flew back to the red-haired woman's side. His terrifying aura was rather chaotic, and he once more stared at Chubei with a hint of dread in his eyes. At their level, they were able to determine the level of their opponent's cultivation as soon as they attacked. Although he wasn't able to determine this person's exact level of cultivation, he was certain that this person was definitely a sovereign, and a sovereign who was far more powerful than him. "I am the owner of the All Heavens shop." Chubei stood there with his hands behind his back, staring with incomparable calmness at the red-haired woman and the sovereign by her side. "What? You are the owner of the All Heavens shop who killed Bar in the infernal realm. Why aren't you heading to the celestial realm's judgment dais? Why have you appeared here?" Upon hearing Chubei's words, the sovereigns of the underworld were all stunned. One after another, their voices filled with surprise. In particular, the white-haired man who had attacked earlier looked increasingly unsightly. If he had known the other party's identity from the beginning, he wouldn't have attacked at all. After all, although lesser sovereigns and intermediate sovereigns were all sovereigns, the difference in strength between them was like heaven and earth. It was an insurmountable chasm. "How interesting. I didn't expect to meet you so early, little fellow." On the throne, the red-haired woman who looked no more than 16 or 17 years old looked at Chubei with interest. "What business do you have with me?" "I need you to revive someone," Chubei said calmly as he looked directly at the Death Dominus. "That doesn't seem like the attitude of someone who is asking for a favor." The Death Dominus looked at Chubei with an amused expression. "No, you can take it that I'm ordering you. If you don't want to, Then I'll take the underworld heart and do it myself. Chu Bei was unusually calm, a smile on his lips the entire time. How arrogant. Do you know who you're talking to? Upon hearing Chu Bei's words, the Death Dominus, who was still smiling, suddenly turned cold, and her brows furrowed. It was also at this moment that the temperature in the ancient castle plummeted again, and a chill filled the air. The 6 sovereigns beside the Death Dominus trembled all of a sudden. They were so frightened that they fell silent. You only have 1 minute to consider. Facing the Death Dominus' icy gaze, Chu Bei didn't show any fear at all. His expression was still calm and collected. Good, very good. No one has ever dared to speak to me like that. The Death Dominus got up from the throne and suddenly burst into laughter. Her laughter became increasingly cold and harsh. After exchanging glances, the sovereigns of the underworld distanced themselves from the Death Dominus in unison. They were well aware of her temper. Although she was laughing, there was a strong murderous intent behind her laughter. More importantly, the Death Dominus wouldn't consider so much once she got angry. They might be implicated as well. Lord Dominus, this is bad. The life over goddess, she's been killed. At this moment, a panicked voice broke the tense atmosphere in the ancient castle. The next moment, a red light swept into the ancient castle. It was a dark red snake. As it descended from the sky, it transformed into a red-clothed man and knelt before the Death Dominus. What did you say? Kai Fu has been killed. Upon hearing the red-clothed man's words, the Death Dominus's expression turned extremely gloomy. The next moment, a dark mist spread out from her body and instantly filled the entire ancient castle. Rumble. Accompanied by a loud noise, under the Death Dominus's murderous intent, the originally majestic ancient castle exploded and rubble flew everywhere. The sovereigns of the underworld soared into the sky and immediately hovered above Mount Hades. They all looked down at the ruins and sighed faintly. At this moment, they didn't dare to make a sound. After all, the Death Dominus had already gone berserk. As for Chu Bei, as soon as the Death Dominus had developed a murderous intent towards him, he had used Xiao Hei's power. Those flying rocks were knocked away by the chaotic force before they could even reach a meter away from Linli and him. Who killed her? The Death Dominus's divine sense instantly covered the entire abyssal mountain. After confirming that she was no longer able to sense the aura of the life over God, her furious roar shook the skies. If a netherworld sovereign had been killed, she wouldn't have lost her composure like this. But the one who had been killed was the life over God who represented the life Dominus. Faced with the Death Dominus's questioning, the red-clothed man formed from the giant dark red snake immediately fell to his knees. Lowering his head, he said in terror. It was a young man who looked to be in his 20s. He didn't have any ripples of divine power, but he was extremely powerful. In front of him, the life over God wasn't able to fight back at all. Hearing the red-clothed man's words, the Death Dominus's gaze once more turned towards Chu Bei. Her murderous intent had already solidified, slicing through space itself. One crack after another spread out like a spiderweb. You were the one who killed Kai Fu. The Death Dominus clenched her fists. The space around her shattered, and an enormous, pitch-black hole appeared. Just looking at it would cause one's heart to tremble. Hearing this, Hongyi raised her head and turned around, trembling. When she saw Chu Bei, whose lips were curled into a smile, she immediately jumped to her feet. Lord Ruler, it's him. It's him. He's the one who killed the sovereign god of life. What a noisy fellow. Chu Bei glanced calmly at the red-clothed man, then casually flicked out with his finger. With a bang, the red-clothed man shot straight into the pitch-black hole behind the Death Dominus. Is the Kai Fu you speak of referring to the abyssal tree? After casually sending the red-clothed man flying, Chu Bei looked calmly at the Death Dominus. Don't worry. She's fine. Only in the future, she'll be following me. Where is she? The Death Dominus roared, and a roiling black fog spread out from behind her, forming into a long spear that pierced through the air towards Chu Bei. Wherever the long spear passed, the black fog would swirl and surge in all directions like a roiling river. The black-clothed man and the other 5 lords of the underworld did not hesitate at all. They immediately hid in the void, avoiding the swirling black fog. Clearly, the black fog contained terrifying energy. Even the black-clothed man and the other lords had to be careful when dealing with it. Bang! However, the long spear formed from the essence of the black fog was shattered by Chu Bei's clenched fist when it was less than half a meter away from him. With a deafening boom, the massive nether mountain was split into 2 halves by the terrifying shockwaves. It was as if an emperor weapon had sliced through the air. Looking at where Chu Bei was and the mountain behind him, there was no damage at all. It was as if they were not affected by the black fog long spear at all. Hey Ku, why do I feel like he's much stronger than you? If it were you, would you be able to withstand a chief sovereign's attack so calmly? Is he really just a middle-rank lord? After glancing at Chu Bei, the black-clothed man tilted his head to look at the black-clothed man beside him. His abilities are above mine. I'm afraid he's already at upper-rank lord level. The black-clothed man frowned. His expression was extremely serious. What? An upper-rank lord? Doesn't that mean he's also a chief sovereign? There are only 11 chief sovereigns. How can he possibly have the abilities of a chief sovereign? The black-clothed man's words immediately caught the attention of the other 5 lords. All of them wore peculiar expressions. I've said before that you only have 1 minute to think about it. Now, time's up. Suddenly, a voice without the slightest hint of emotion came from Chu Bei's mouth. Since you're unwilling to help me of your own accord, I can only take your underworld heart and do it myself. As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Bei rose into the air and faced the Death Dominus. Subsequently, a terrifying wave of energy that was not at all inferior to the Death Dominus's swept out from Chu Bei. The terrifying aura shattered the dark clouds in the sky, and the abyssal mountain below collapsed with a loud crash. In the vast mountain forest, tens of thousands of ferocious beasts and birds fled in panic. Tragic cries rang out continuously. Chapter 529. Arrogant to the extreme. The Death Dominus coldly stared at Chu Bei. Just as the cold shout filled with dense killing intent rang out, layers of black fog once again spread out with her as the center. Unlike before, the black fog this time was mixed with the color of blood. Moreover, it covered a wide area, almost encompassing half of the underworld behind her. Occasionally, terrifying explosions could be heard in the air. The next moment, a boundlessly large purple figure formed behind the Death Dominus. She towered between heaven and earth as if she had lived for countless years. Heavens! Look at the sky. What's going on? In the blink of an eye, half of the underworld had become a sea of black blood. The air was filled with the pungent smell of blood. At this moment, all the gods on the underworld continent looked up at the sky at the same time. When the blood-colored black fog pressed down, the gods instantly paled. For some reason, they felt a bone-piercing chill. This wasn't a true change in temperature, but a chill brought about by killing intent. It quickly invaded their bodies, causing their hearts to palpitate. That's the Death Dominus. Heavens! Who offended her? Fortunately, this killing intent isn't directed at us. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Just as the gods of the underworld were frantically circulating the divine power in their bodies and doing their best to resist the murderous aura of the blood-red mist, a second gigantic figure suddenly appeared in the sky. Boss, it's him. How did he provoke the Death Dominus? Could it be because he took the abyssal fruit tree? Then now that we have the abyssal fruit, will the Death Dominus come looking for us? When the second enormous figure appeared, the gods on the underworld continent were in an uproar. In particular, the 3 men who had received the abyssal fruit from Chu Bei, led by the silver-haired youth, looked uneasy. This world is far larger than you can imagine. Don't think that you've reached the end of your cultivation. If you really have such thoughts, I'm afraid you'll never be able to transcend. Chu Bei crossed his arms in front of his chest and calmly looked at the Death Dominus. His nonchalant appearance was not affected by the blood-colored black fog at all. Hand over the Caifu. and I'll leave your corpse intact." The Sovereign of Death wasn't in the mood to pay attention to Chu Bei's words. Her voice didn't have a trace of emotion, only endless coldness. After saying that, countless mysterious symbols appeared on the Death Dominus's skin, and a scythe-shaped magic pattern appeared on his forehead. Behind him, a pair of huge blood-red wings appeared out of thin air. Rumble. The Death Dominus flapped her wings, and a great amount of bloody light instantly erupted from the gap in space behind her. Her figure instantly appeared in front of Chu Bei. Then, under the gazes of the 6 sovereigns, the Sovereign of Death's 2 claws, covered in blood-red armor, pierced straight into Chu Bei's chest. At the same time, the water of Acheron surged beneath his feet, and a bone-piercing chill spread out in an instant, frightening people to the core. Chu Bei remained unmoved. Xiao Hei's power was far above his opponent's by an entire realm. No matter how powerful the Death Dominus was, Linley was absolutely confident in his ability to suppress her. Just as the Death Dominus's hands were about to touch Chu Bei clenched his fists, and strange images of primordial chaos began to appear around them. A buzzing sound could be heard. Chu Bei clenched his fists, then met the Death Dominus's claws in a simple, brutal manner. Rumble. The fists and claws collided. Yet another massive, heaven-shaking explosion. At the point of collision, space itself shattered. Terrifying shockwaves rippled outwards like waves. The 6 sovereigns closest to Linley were the first to bear the brunt of the shockwaves. Before they could even react, the blood in their chests roiled, and they spat out mouthfuls of blood. As for Linley, because Chu Bei was protecting him, he wasn't injured at all. He actually blocked the Lord Sovereign's close-range attack. Can it be that he really is a sovereign as well? Otherwise, how could he have blocked the Lord Sovereign's attack? But he's hidden himself too deeply. Which sovereign hasn't lived for 10 million years? No. Not only did he block it, he even knocked the Lord Sovereign back. After the 6 Netherworld sovereigns steadied themselves, they were first stunned. When they came back to their senses, they once more stared at Chu Bei. Their gazes were instantly filled with terror. On the battlefield, after that incomparably terrifying collision, space itself had already shattered. Chu Bei and the Death Dominus seemed to have appeared in a mysterious space that was separate from the Netherworld. Chu Bei immediately withdrew his fists. He stood there, not retreating in the slightest. The Death Dominus, however, was knocked flying backwards like a cannonball. How could this be? The Lord Death Dominus was actually defeated. The Lord Sovereign must have underestimated him. He is the most powerful expert of our Netherworld, one of the 4 chief sovereigns of the edicts. But even if the Lord Sovereign didn't use his full strength, his attacks still aren't something that an ordinary sovereign can withstand. Speaking of which, where did that person who fought the Lord Sovereign come from? Can it be that he is a sovereign as well? That elemental god sovereign? Impossible. I've seen all 11 sovereigns, but none of them look like him. Just as the gods of the Netherworld were discussing Chu Bei's strength, the Death Dominus' blood-purple wings, which were as sharp as blades, suddenly flapped behind him. After using the recoil to stabilize his body, he leaned forward and swept toward Chu Bei again. This time, the Death Dominus retracted his arms. His body was in the air, and his movements were as smooth as flowing water. A long red robe fluttered in the wind, attracting rolling thunder. It carried a terrifying purple light as it flashed and appeared above Chu Bei's head. Then, it chopped down forcefully, like a giant axe that could destroy the world falling from the sky. In the face of another attack from the Death Dominus, Chu Bei's expression remained calm and collected from beginning to end. Chu Bei didn't even look at the Death Dominus' flying leg. His fingers were like a sword, and after drawing a beautiful arc in the air, a huge dragon head opened its ferocious mouth to meet the attack. Rumble. Another earth-shattering sound rang out. The dragon head and the blood-red leg intertwined, and a sizzling sound rang out incessantly. The attack was blocked again, and the Death Dominus flapped her wings and landed in her original position. This time, she wasn't in a hurry to attack. Instead, she sized up Chu Bei with a cold gaze. She frowned, and it wasn't difficult to see that her expression had become more serious. Her 2 attacks had ended in failure. This was enough for her to take the person in front of her seriously. Especially when she saw how calm and composed he was, she couldn't help but feel shocked. The Lord Dominus has stopped. Could it be that the Death Dominus really can't take this person down? Judging from the 2 collisions just now, the Lord Dominus does seem to be at a disadvantage. It's hard to say who's the victor now. After all, the reason why the 4 sovereigns of laws are above the other sovereigns is that they have supreme Master God weapons. That's true. Supreme Master God weapons are divine weapons bestowed by the Supreme Master Gods. Although the Lord Dominus failed to attack the Lord Dominus twice, if she uses the Supreme Master God weapon, their battle will probably end in an instant. In any case, after this battle, this person is destined to leave his name in the netherworld for eternity. I just don't know how he angered the Lord Dominus. The 6 sovereigns, including the white-haired man, and the gods of the netherworld, upon seeing the Death Dominus suffer 2 consecutive defeats, all sucking in cold breaths. When they looked at Chu Bei again, the look in their eyes was even more strange. As for Linley, all that remained in his eyes was fervent worship. The Death Dominus was known as the most powerful expert of the netherworld. One didn't even need to think about how terrifyingly powerful she was. But even such a powerful existence didn't have any advantage in front of his master. The black, blood-red fog that the Death Dominus had released, which covered the entire netherworld, was completely useless against Chu Bei. Before the black fog could even approach Chu Bei, it was forced back by the swirling chaos energy around him. You really do have some power. No wonder you dare to speak to me like this. The Death Dominus stared intently at Chu Bei. From her words, she clearly acknowledged Chu Bei's power. Chapter 530. What? Scared? Chu Bei looked at the Death Dominus with a smile. So what if you're also a juggernaut? The Death Dominus expression darkened at the sight of Chu Bei's playful expression. Then, with a shout, she crossed her arms and clenched them. The next moment, the air in front of the Death Dominus buzzed. Then, a large amount of red light appeared and condensed into a long sword. Countless beautiful demonic patterns shone on the surface of the sword. The image of a skull was engraved on the hilt, while the tip of the sword pulsed with a black glow and released a fierce aura. This aura it's a Supreme Chief God weapon. So the Lord Juggernaut's Supreme Chief God weapon is a sword. It's an offensive weapon. Has the Lord Juggernaut been forced to use his Supreme Chief God weapon by the owner of All Heaven's shop? In that case, doesn't that mean the owner of All Heaven's shop is already stronger than those elemental god juggernauts? What a joke. Who spread the news that the owner of All Heaven's shop is an intermediate chief god? Then again, since the Lord Juggernaut has already used his Supreme Chief God weapon, it's time for this battle to end. Upon sensing the aura of the red sword that had appeared in front of the Death Dominus, the faces of the 6 chief gods changed drastically. Just the aura of the sword itself was enough to make them want to prostrate themselves in worship. This was definitely not a might that a chief god weapon could possess. Interesting. Chu Bei glanced at the red sword, his lips curling into a smile. Through this sword, he could roughly guess the cultivation realms of those 4 so-called supreme chief gods. As a juggernaut, I know that your cultivation has not been easy. I'll say it one more time. Hand over the kaifu, and I'll spare your life. The Death Dominus reached out and grabbed the sword hilt. In that instant, her aura surged wildly again. Chu Bei shrugged, his attitude very clear. You asked for it. As her cold voice fell, the Death Dominus moved, the blood-black wings on her back fluttering. Her body began to spin violently. With her as the center, a tornado of blood mist instantly formed around her. At the same time, the red long sword in her hand danced rhythmically. Everywhere it passed, the void collapsed. Thin bolts of black lightning flashed on the surface of the sword. The lightning and the red blood mist intertwined and merged, finally converging at the tip of the sword. Death God chant. The cold and indifferent voice of the Sovereign of Death rang out from within the blood-red tornado. At the same time, A dazzling red sword within the tornado viciously swept towards Chu Bei. Before the sword tip arrived, countless sword shadows had already arrived in front of Chu Bei. Every time the sword shadows were stacked on top of each other, the sharpness would increase by a notch. When all the sword shadows overlapped and finally merged with the tip of the sword, a brilliant black and red light exploded around Chu Bei. His aura was monstrous. Bang! Amidst the explosions that shook the heavens, the battlefield was completely filled with blood-red light, like a crimson ocean. The gods of the netherworld, including the 6 sovereigns, stared blankly at the battlefield. However, all they could see was the sovereign of death wielding a resplendent red sword of light. They couldn't see the owner of All Heaven's shop. Did the owner of the All Heaven's shop lose? That's an overgod artifact, and it was the sovereign of death who attacked. What's more, it's an offensive weapon. Makes sense. If the owner of the All Heaven's shop didn't die under the might of an overgod artifact, that would be abnormal. But what a pity. A chief sovereign who has been in hiding for 10 million years just died like that. Who told him to offend the chief sovereigns of the edicts? They all have overgod artifacts. On the battlefield, the sea of blood had yet to dissipate, but the 6 sovereigns of the netherworld could already see how this battle would end. Master! Hearing the words of the 6 sovereigns, Linley's face was rather ashen. Clenching his fists, he immediately called out towards the battlefield. Linley's eyes were already filled with the color of blood. Disciple, don't worry. If this is all you've got, you're far from being able to harm your master. Just as Linley's frantic cries rang out, Chu Bei's mocking voice rang out from within the mysterious battlefield, echoing throughout the entire netherworld. Hearing this, the faces of the netherworld deities changed. But before they could even cry out in shock, the sea of blood on the battlefield, along with a cold laugh, collapsed, transforming into a rain of light that dissipated. In the next moment, an enormous illusion of the iron lump appeared in the air, and in front of the iron lump, a figure hovered there. It was Chu Bei. Chu Bei's smile slowly faded, and his entire aura changed as well. He seemed to have become serious. He stood there calmly, like the ruler of the universe. He didn't move, but he carried with him a terrifying aura. It is time to end this. As his calm voice rang out, Chu Bei's body slowly sank into the illusion of the iron lump, merging with it. And then, 2 streaks of red light shot out from the iron lump's eyes, and at the same time, a low sound came from his mouth. This time, it wasn't just a sound wave attack. There were also streaks of golden, spiraling rings of light, which interweaved in a meter-shaped pattern. The netherworld deities, including the 6 sovereigns, couldn't even hold on for half a second before they immediately used their divine power to seal up their ears. But despite that, their divine souls continued to tremble, as though they would leave their bodies at any moment. Swish! With a buzzing sound, the spiraling rings of light instantly appeared above the chief sovereign of Death's head, crashing down with a boom. You're actually fine. The chief sovereign of Death stared at Chu Bei in disbelief. She had used all of her strength in that sword attack just now, without holding back at all. But despite that, her opponent had still survived the attack of an overgod weapon, and he hadn't been injured at all. If it weren't for the fact that the long sword in her hand was still powerful, she would have suspected that her sword attack had been incomplete, or that it had missed. Looking at the meter-shaped, spiraling rings of light above her head, the chief sovereign of Death frowned. The red sword in her hand danced again, and then she slashed upwards. However, right when she stabbed out with her sword and the tip of her sword touched the spiraling circle of light, her expression changed, and a strand of surprise suddenly surged into her eyes. After that, the surprise turned into astonishment, and in the end, it turned into terror. At the moment of collision, she suddenly realized that the connection between her and the overgod weapon had been mysteriously severed. Clang! With a metallic sound, several spiraling rings of light wrapped around the red sword, and with a whoosh, she was actually snatched away from the chief sovereign of Death's hands. Give it back to me. With the overgod weapon out of her hands, the chief sovereign of Death's voice was clearly more flustered, as though her greatest protection had been taken away. Her figure flashed, and at the same time, she reached out to grab the red sword's hilt. However, before she could touch the hilt, the remaining spiraling rings of light pressed down on her. My body. How is it possible? Suddenly, the chief sovereign of death let out a terrified cry, and a chill surged in her heart. At this moment, she no longer cared about the overgod weapon, because unknowingly, her body had been imprisoned. She had never imagined that she would be imprisoned by someone. She was one of the 4 chief sovereigns of the laws, the strongest expert of the netherworld. Even the strongest chief sovereign of the laws, the chief sovereign of fate, Orloff, couldn't possibly imprison her body. But now, the owner of the all-heaven shop had actually done it. At this moment, she no longer dared to guess the strength of the owner of the all-heaven shop, because he was definitely above the chief sovereigns, including the chief sovereigns of the laws. Looking at the spiraling rings of light pressing down on her head, this was the first time she had felt so close to death. Just as the overlapping rings of light were about to land on the chief sovereign of death's body, she took a deep breath, as though she had made an incomparably painful and difficult decision. Rumble. Under the gazes of countless gods of the netherworld, the spiraling rings of light wrapped around the chief sovereign of death's body and exploded. Countless pieces of flesh splattered across the battlefield. At the same time, the projection of the iron lump, which had fused with Chu Bei, once again let out the sound of the great Tao. It spread through the 9 heavens, directly shattering the void of the battlefield and spreading to the entire netherworld continent. Amidst this terrifying sound of the great Tao, the 6 sovereigns, who bore the brunt of it, trembled violently. Their expressions became extremely distorted, as though they had suffered a great deal of destruction. The gods of the netherworld clutched their heads in pain and howled incessantly. There were only a few who were still standing. The sound of the great Tao faded away. When they recovered and focused their eyes on the battlefield once more, their expressions suddenly froze, and their pupils abruptly contracted. One of the 4 chief sovereigns of the laws, the strongest expert of the netherworld, the chief sovereign of death, had died. There was no longer any blood-colored light on the battlefield. The overgod weapon had also fallen into Chu Bei's hands. Chu Bei didn't leave the battlefield. As though he had sensed something, he focused his gaze on the exploded pieces of flesh. The pieces of flesh lit up with a hazy fluorescent light, and then they began to gather together. Soon, they actually reformed back into the chief sovereign of death. However, compared to before, the chief sovereign of death could be said to be extremely weak now. In front of Chu Bei, she was no different from a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. You actually managed to escape this seat's killing tribulation. Interesting. Chu Bei looked at the sovereign of death with interest. The sovereign of death lived up to her reputation as the strongest expert of the underworld. She actually possessed a terrifying death substitution divine ability. Only, the death substitution divine ability would exhaust nearly 90% of her power. Who are you? Who exactly are you? The chief sovereign of death spat out large mouthfuls of blood as she muttered. Her eyes were firmly fixed on Chu Bei, filled with intense unwillingness and even more confusion. She couldn't understand how such a powerful and terrifying existence had appeared out of thin air. His strength was actually above hers. In her opinion, perhaps even the chief sovereign of fate wasn't a match for the owner of the all-heaven shop. Perhaps only those 4 illusory, ethereal overgods would be able to defeat them. Thinking of this, the chief sovereign of death frowned and exclaimed, "Could it be? You're a overgod? Do you still remember what this seat said before? On the path of cultivation, you're still far from the end. It's just that this narrow world limits your horizons. Only when you jump out of the plane can you truly understand what it means to say that there's always someone better out there." Chu Bei shook his head. "Since you managed to escape this seat's killing move once, this seat will spare your life. Look, Lord Sovereign isn't dead. She's alive. But from the looks of it, she no longer has the strength to fight. In the end, she's still lost. This is too crazy. Where did that mysterious person come from?" Looking at the resurrected chief sovereign of death, The gods of the netherworld were stunned for a moment. When they came back to their senses, they were overjoyed. As for the 6 overgods in the sky above Abyssal Mountain, they looked at each other with strange expressions on their faces. When they looked at Chu Bei again, their gazes were filled with even more shock. A overgod. This was the title that the chief sovereign of death had given to the owner of the all-heavens shop. If a lesser overgod, an intermediate overgod, or the elemental god sovereigns had said this, they would definitely scoff. However, the one who had said this was one of the 4 chief sovereigns of the laws, the chief sovereign of death, an invincible existence below the overgod level. Chapter 531. Aren't overgods the edicts of heaven and earth? Is there really someone who can train to that level? If he really does have the power of an overgod, then this so-called sovereign trial against the owner of the all-heaven shop will be nothing more than a joke. The 6 sovereigns of the netherworld seemed to have thought of something, and their lips couldn't help but twitch. Transcend this world? Can it be that you don't belong to the thousands of planes? On the battlefield, the chief sovereign of death seemed to have understood something from Chu Bei's words, and her face changed in shock. I always stop when I'm done. You can figure out the rest on your own. After saying those words with a hint of a smile, Chu Bei flicked his finger, and the overgod artifact flew towards Linley. And then, he stretched out his hand towards the chief sovereign of death. In the next instant, a terrifying divine light emanated from Chu Bei's palm, covering the chief sovereign of death's entire body. A blood-red object that looked like a human heart flew out from her body. The netherworld heart. The core of the netherworld. It was the physical manifestation of the laws of heaven and earth that controlled the operation of the netherworld. Through the netherworld heart, one could easily inspect any person who had died and become an undead. Master, are you giving me this sword? Also, are you preparing to revive my father? Linley transformed into a 5-clawed golden dragon, then soared into the air and flew to Chu Bei's side. Clutching the overgod artifact, he stared at the netherworld heart in front of Chu Bei. His body was trembling, and his face was filled with incomparable excitement. Chu Bei nodded towards Linley, then stretched out his hand and pressed it against the netherworld heart. Buzz, buzz. Instantly, the netherworld heart emitted a low hum, releasing trillions of rays of bloody light that instantly covered the entire netherworld. Can it be that his goal in coming to the netherworld is to revive the dead? What sort of undead in our netherworld would require someone like him to personally revive them? The gods of the netherworld gradually understood what Chu Bei's goal was, and they all began to cry out in shock. The netherworld. The northern Ashbel wastelands. Aside from the sinister skeletons and zombies, there was also a group of floating undead. Tens of thousands of blood-red rays shrouded the wasteland. The abnormal creatures on the wasteland all let out painful and shrill cries. Only one undead creature looked up at the sky in a daze. To be precise, he was no longer an undead. His body was growing, and in a short while, he had become a person of flesh and blood. What's going on with me? Could it be that I've been resurrected and recovered my memories from my previous life? Will I ever be able to return to the Yulon continent? My sons, Linley, Wharton, how are they doing? As the memories of his previous life came back to him, the figure's emotionless expression became complicated. Then, his empty eyes became filled with reluctance, as well as a kind of unreconciled hatred. He was worried about his children, and he wanted to avenge his wife. He was Linley's father, Hog. Chi. At this moment, a red light fell with a gust of wind. Hog's spirit trembled, and when he came back to his senses, the scenery around him had changed dramatically. Father! A voice called out to him. Hog's body began to tremble. When he turned and saw Linley, his lips began to quiver. Child, it's you. I didn't expect to see you again. Hog immediately rushed forward, tightly embracing Linley. Lord Father, it was Master who brought you back to life. Linley's eyes were red as he said, Master has avenged Mother for us as well. Hearing Linley's words, Hog immediately fell to his knees towards Chu Bei, kowtowing viciously. Thank you, my lord. His words were filled with power, echoing in the air. Rise. You, father and son, are reunited. Let's chat a bit more. Chu Bei nodded, then waved his hand and helped Hog to his feet. Master, since you were able to bring father back to life, can you bring mother back to life as well? Linley took a deep breath, looking expectantly at Chu Bei. At almost the same time, Hog's face changed. His gaze was fixed on Chu Bei, his face incomparably nervous. Chu Bei shook his head. Your mother is different from your father. She isn't in the netherworld. Not in the netherworld? Linley repeated, and then his face sank. Master, are you saying that my mother's soul has dissipated as well? The nearby Hog looked as though he was about to die, constantly sighing. What Master means is that your mother isn't dead yet, and so there's no need for Master to bring her back to life. Chu Bei tossed the netherworld heart to the chief sovereign of death, then continued, What? My mother, wife, isn't dead. Hearing Chu Bei's words, Linley and Hog's ashen faces were instantly filled with joy. Father and son were both incomparably excited. You'll be able to see her soon. Chu Bei nodded once more. Then do you still wish to go to the celestial realm? The chief sovereign of death seemed to have thought of something, and she looked at Chu Bei as she spoke, her tone clearly filled with respect. Go. Of course I'm going. How can I miss such an interesting event? In addition, I'm the main character this time. Chu Bei's lips curled into a hint of a smile. Hearing this, the chief sovereign of death shook her head, letting out a long sigh. Heaven Realm, Tranquil Heart Island. The so-called Tranquil Heart Island was not floating on the surface of the sea. Instead, it was suspended in the air. Although its appearance was similar to an island, its area was so large that it was boundless. It could even be described as a small continent. Looking around, all sorts of rare birds were flying around the floating island, creating all sorts of strange phenomena. At this moment, on the 7 teleportation arrays not far from the island, multiple figures would appear from time to time. As soon as these figures left the teleportation arrays, they all rushed towards Tranquil Heart Island, fighting to be the first, as though they were afraid that they would be slower than others. Looking at the central region of Tranquil Heart Island, there were tens of thousands of figures. These figures all had incredibly powerful auras. Even the weakest of them was a mid-god. Of course, although these gods were standing on a first-come, first-served basis, it was mainly based on strength. Normally, there would not be so many people on Tranquil Heart Island. The reason for today's abnormality was that the 4 sovereigns of the laws were going to discuss the matter of the all-heaven shop master killing Master Godbar, and punish him accordingly. Above the central region of Tranquil Heart Island, there was a circular platform. The platform had 8 corners, and each corner had a chain that extended to a giant pillar in the distance. This circular platform had existed for an unknown number of years. It had a name, and it was called the Master God Judgment Platform. From its name, one could tell what it meant. Only when a Master God committed a mistake would the Master God Judgment Platform be activated. Even the most powerful high gods were not qualified to stand on the platform. The people in charge of judging were the sovereigns of the laws of fate, destruction, death, and life. Has the Master of all heaven's shop come? Where is he? I've been here for 4 hours, and I haven't even seen a hair of the Master of all heaven's shop. I seriously suspect that he's gone into hiding out of fear. How could that be? He's not stupid. The sovereigns of the laws have terrifying abilities. If he came to explain himself, he might still have a chance of survival. If he continues to hide, it'll be no different from confirming his crimes. At most, he won't live for more than 3 days. Then tell me, there's less than 15 minutes left before the 6 hours the chief sovereign of fate gave us. Where is the Master of all heaven's shop? What's the rush? Those chief sovereigns haven't even arrived yet. Around the Master God Judgment Platform, a group of powerful high gods stared at the empty platform, all of them frowning. Quick look! A Lord Sovereign has arrived. That's the Bloodridge Sovereign of the Infernal Realm. Those fellows behind him are the 4 Divine Beasts clan. According to the news of the Grandas, Lei Dingbear of the 4 Divine Beast clan has already become a sovereign. Didn't he just rely on the divine spark of ball that the Master of all heaven's shop gave him? One streak of divine light after another flew over from different directions, all carrying incomparably terrifying auras. As these divine lights arrived, the high gods who had been closest to the Master God Judgment platform all moved backwards. Only sovereigns could cause these high gods to be so fearful and respectful. I didn't expect to be the first to arrive. At this moment, a loud laugh drifted out from Tranquil Heart Island. Before the gods could find the source of the voice, a figure appeared on the originally empty platform. It was a middle-aged man dressed in blue robes. Wind blades could be faintly seen circling around his body, emanating a fierce aura that inadvertently sliced apart the space around him. The chief sovereign of wind. Upon seeing the blue-robed man's appearance, the gods were first stunned, then they all cried out in surprise. The chief sovereign of earth has arrived as well, and the chief sovereigns of fire, water, wind, and darkness. Not long after, 6 figures appeared on the circular platform. The chief sovereigns of the 7 elemental planes. The only one missing is the chief sovereign of light. This is the first time I've seen so many chief sovereigns at once. Who isn't? It's all thanks to the Master of all Heaven's shop for giving us this opportunity. Gazing at the 6 figures on the platform, the gods all laughed mockingly. This Master of all Heaven's shop is quite interesting. He's just a mere intermediate sovereign. Does he really think he can escape the control of those 4 fellows? The chief sovereign of darkness's entire body was shrouded in black mist. He swept the area with his gaze. If I were in his shoes, I really would like to take this Master of all Heaven's shop under my command. After all, in the Yulon continent, he destroyed the Radiant Church. Judging from the situation this time, his chances of surviving are 0. The chief sovereign of fire, his entire body covered in flames, glanced at the chief sovereign of darkness as he spoke. Time passed, 1 minute at a time. 6 hours before the chief sovereign of fate gave his orders, yet another 3 figures landed on the platform. The appearance of these 3 caused the 6 chief sovereigns on the platform to feel deep veneration. They simultaneously bowed and clasped their fists in greeting, their gazes filled with respect. They were a middle-aged man dressed in a black robe who gave off a sinister aura, a beautiful woman dressed in a long green robe, and a white-robed, white-haired old man. The chief sovereign of destruction, the chief sovereign of life, and the chief sovereign of fate. The sovereigns closest to the circular platform, upon recognizing these 3, all called out in surprise, "Hey! 3 chief sovereigns of the edicts have already appeared. Where is the chief sovereign of death? The chief sovereigns of life and fate haven't lost any of their soul auras at all. Most likely, they have already reached the level of Paragon in terms of the profound mysteries of the laws. Supposedly, the chief sovereign of death was the very first life form of the netherworld. In terms of innate divine abilities, she is most likely no weaker than the chief sovereigns of life and fate. Stop guessing. Forget about the 4 chief sovereigns of the edicts. Even the chief sovereign of the elemental elements is far more powerful than we can imagine. Since you've arrived, then take a seat. A cold voice rang out from the platform. The speaker was the chief sovereign of destruction. As soon as this cold, incomparably dignified voice drifted out, the discussions around the judgment platform immediately ceased. Everyone fell silent. Chapter 532. As soon as the chief sovereign of destruction finished speaking, one exquisite chair after another appeared out of nowhere in the air above the sovereign's judgment dais. The gods were slightly startled. After exchanging glances, they all chose a seat nearby and sat down. 11 chairs appeared atop the enormous judgment dais as well. These chairs formed an enormous circle, and because they were circular, there was no upper or lower position. The 3 chief sovereigns of the edicts and the 6 chief sovereigns of the elements took their seats. Why hasn't the chief sovereign of death arrived yet? The chief sovereign of fate glanced at the 2 empty chairs, frowning, then turned to the chief sovereign of life and asked, "The chief sovereign of light hasn't arrived either. Perhaps they were delayed on the way." The chief sovereign of life laughed. Just as the chief sovereign of life finished speaking, a ripple appeared in the air above the judgment dais, and a red-haired, Pretty Maiden descended and sat down on the chair next to the chief sovereign of life. Little sister, why are you so late? As soon as the chief sovereign of death sat down, the chief sovereign of life asked in concern. Big sister, there's been a change in the situation. The chief sovereign of death glanced at the chief sovereign of fate, then shook her head and sent a message to the chief sovereign of life through divine sense. What situation? Are you referring to the matter of the current owner of the All Heavens Judgment Shop? The chief sovereign of life also sent a reply through divine sense. The chief sovereign of death nodded. You'll find out soon enough. The owner of the All Heavens Judgment Shop isn't an intermediate sovereign. He's far more powerful than we imagined. What do you mean? Can it be that he's already at our level? The chief sovereign of life's mouth opened slightly, a look of surprise on her face. The chief sovereign of death shook her head, then continued to send through divine sense. Big sister, you're wrong. He hasn't reached our level. He's already surpassed us. What? From what you're saying, you've already fought him. The chief sovereign of life asked tentatively, a look of disbelief on her face. I lost. I lost completely. If it wasn't for the fact that I had a death substitution technique, my body and soul probably would have been destroyed. The chief sovereign of death took a deep breath, a hint of fear in her voice. You used a death substitution technique? How is that possible? Did you use an overgod artifact? The chief sovereign of life frowned. Her face became incomparably solemn. To him, a so-called overgod artifact is no different from a piece of scrap metal. He has already surpassed us. He isn't on the same level as us. The chief sovereign of death continued to speak through divine sense. He doesn't belong to us. What do you mean? The life dominus narrowed her eyes. The death dominus shook her head. He didn't say much about that. Then where is he right now? The life dominus asked. Radiance world. The death sovereign pointed at the empty seat beside the darkness sovereign. Is that why he hasn't arrived yet? The life dominus was surprised. Radiance world. Impossible. It's fake. Everything is fake. You're not an intermediate chief god at all. Above the radiant temple, the chief sovereign of light Augusta's aura was in disarray, and his face was rather pale. He looked at the young man in front of him, his eyes flashing with disbelief. Other than that, there was also a strong sense of hatred. Of the 7 elemental sovereigns, he was unquestionably the strongest. He was already infinitely close to the 4 elemental sovereigns. If he had an overgod artifact in hand, he would be confident in being able to do battle against the 4 chief sovereigns of the edicts. But in that clash just now, he had actually been defeated. He had been at a disadvantage. Previously, he had been planning to go to Tranquil Heart Island in the Celestial Realm. If the 4 elemental sovereigns spared the owner of the All Heavens Shop, he would secretly kill him. After all, he had destroyed his foundation in the Yulon continent. However, he had never imagined that the owner of the All Heavens Shop, who should have been put on trial, would actually come directly to the Radiance world and seek him out first. In addition, his opponent's level of cultivation wasn't that of an intermediate chief god at all. Judging from the earlier clash, his opponent definitely wasn't any weaker than him. In fact, he had the feeling that this owner of the All Heavens Shop was already comparable to the 4 elemental sovereigns. When did I ever say that I was an intermediate chief god? Chu Bei laughed as he looked at the chief sovereign of light, Augusta. He then waved his hand towards the northeast. The void there instantly distorted, and then several white-robed women with 6 pairs of pure white wings flew over. These women were the 12-winged angels of the Radiance world, and had the power of a high god. In the instant that these angels appeared, Hog's pupils contracted, and his gaze focused on a brown-haired angel. Hog's mouth was wide open, but he didn't make a sound. His eyes instantly turned red. Lena, Hog called out in a trembling voice. Hearing this, the brown-haired 12-winged angel turned to look at Hog, a puzzled look in her eyes as she frowned slightly. Father, is she mother? Seeing Hog lose his composure, Linley seemed to have guessed something, and he cleared his throat. He began to carefully inspect this beautiful brown-haired angel. In terms of appearance, she did indeed look rather similar to himself. Mother, huh? Linley could sense his heart tremble slightly as he murmured to himself, "Lena, you don't recognize me?" Hogg immediately charged forward, but just as he was about to grab the brown-haired 12-winged angel's hands, she suddenly dodged to the side. "Father, is she really my mother?" Linley hurriedly looked at Hogg. Although he already knew the answer, he still couldn't help but ask. "Yes, she definitely is." Hogg nodded heavily, his gaze incomparably certain. "She looks exactly the same as she did in the past, and that familiar aura as well. I'll never forget it." Hogg clearly remembered how he and his wife, Lena, had leaned against each other, smelling her scent. As soon as he saw this brown-haired angel, he was certain that this was his wife. "Master, who are they?" The brown-haired 12-winged angel swept Hogg and Linley with a puzzled gaze, then looked towards the chief sovereign of light. Her expression was incomparably respectful, and she was about to kneel. "Master, my mother, your master knows." Seeing that the brown-haired angel was about to kneel to the chief sovereign of light, Linley's face suddenly sank. But before he could finish, Chu Bei nodded slightly. And then, with a wave of his sleeve, a dazzling light surrounded the brown-haired angel, preventing her from kneeling. "Benefactor, what happened to Lena? Why doesn't she remember me?" Hogg hurriedly stepped forward, bowing deeply towards Chu Bei. "She entered the angelic resurrection pool and became a 12-winged angel. She lost her memories." Chu Bei said calmly. "Master, how can she be restored?" Linley immediately asked with incomparable respect. "Leave it to me." Chu Bei chuckled, and then his gaze once more fell upon the chief sovereign of light, Augusta. "So it was for her sake that you destroyed my foundation in the Yulon continent. You even came to the divine light plane." Augusta now understood what had happened. When he met Chu Bei's gaze, his gaze was incomparably cold, without a hint of emotion. "I also need to restore her memories," Chu Bei continued. "Impossible." Augusta's face sank. There were only two ways to restore the memories of a 12-winged angel. The first was for him to sever his connection to the angelic resurrection pool. The second was for him to die. Regardless of whether it was the former or the latter, he wouldn't choose either option. "Whether or not her memories can be restored is not up to you." Chu Bei took a step forward, staring coldly at Augusta as he cracked his lips into a smile. This smile caused Augusta's heart to tremble. "If you want to kill me, it won't be that easy." After suppressing the fear in his heart, Augusta let out a cold snort, and a dazzling sword of light appeared in his hand. Rumble. As the sword of light appeared, the space around Augusta began to collapse. A sharp, piercing energy shot out like a needle, piercing through one spatial tear after another, and a blinding sword light shot out from the tip of the sword towards Chu Bei. Clang! Chu Bei jabbed out with a finger, and the blinding sword light instantly shattered. And then, with a single step, he pierced through space and appeared directly in front of Augusta. Staring at Chu Bei, who was right in front of him, Augusta's pupils contracted, and a cold feeling filled his heart. Chapter 533. Because he had already tested out Chu Bei's attack, Augusta knew that Chu Bei's power was no weaker than his own. Thus, he had attacked with his most powerful sword attack, but he hadn't imagined that despite that, his sword would still be so easily shattered by the opponent. In this moment, he completely realized the difference between him and the master of the all-heavens shop. Boom! After coming back to his senses, Augusta didn't hesitate at all. His body sank into the void, and with a flash of golden light, he fled into chaotic space. Where can the person I want to kill flee to? Staring in the direction Augusta had fled in, Chu Bei's face didn't show any hint of panic. Casually, he waved his hand, bringing Linley, Hogg, and Lena to follow closely behind Augusta through chaotic space. And then, Chu Bei punched out, his fist accompanied by a draconic roar. In the blink of an eye, he appeared behind Augusta. Damn! The chief sovereign of light, Augusta, turned to look at the enormous fist which had almost reached his back. He could sense the wild aura contained within it, and his face instantly turned ashen. Letting out a loud roar, Augusta instinctively unleashed all of his divine power, and his speed once more increased to the maximum. The celestial realm's tranquil heart island. We've arrived. While fleeing, Augusta seemed to sense something, and his ugly face was instantly filled with joy. With an enormous rumbling sound, his hands were covered with golden light, and he tore a hole in the void. Outside the hole was an enormous island, and at the center of the island was a circular platform bound by many chains. At this moment, there were 10 figures seated on the platform, with only a single empty chair. Around the platform, there were tens of thousands of figures. The closer one got to the platform, the more powerful the aura of the deities became. Lord Chief Sovereigns of the Edicts, the time has come. Since the master of the all-heaven shop has yet to appear, I imagine he knows that he has committed a crime. My lords, please capture him and give us an explanation. In the northeast, Luke knelt down in the direction of the judge's platform, a look of respect on his face. That fellow again. For the news of our benefactor killing Baal to reach the ears of the chief sovereigns of the edicts so quickly, it definitely has something to do with him. Yeah, we shouldn't have let him go back then. If I kill him, not only will I be able to obtain another overgod divine core, I won't have to put the owner of the all-heavens shop in danger. Redding Bell and Blood Mountain looked at each other. Their eyes were filled with killing intent as they looked at Lu Ku. Fine. Let this old man find the owner of the all-heavens shop. The chief sovereign of fate, Orloff, rose to his feet. Halfway through his words, he suddenly paused and raised his head to look at the skies. At almost the same time, the other sovereigns on the judgment dais, as well as the gods who had come to watch the show, all followed Orloff's lead and looked towards the sky. At some point in time, a gap had appeared in the distant sky. A dazzling light flashed through the gap and arrived above the judgment platform in an instant. That's the chief sovereign of light, Lord Augusta. I thought he was busy, but he still came in the end. Unfortunately, although the Lord Ruler of Light has come, the owner of the all-heavens business has yet to arrive. Upon seeing the newcomer's appearance, the expressions of the Juggernaut and the gods on the judgment platform changed. Lord Orloff, save me. At this moment, an anxious voice spread from the sky, echoing throughout the entire tranquil heart island. What's going on? The Lord Ruler of Light is actually asking the chief sovereign of fate for help. Lord Augusta's aura isn't right. It's extremely chaotic. He's fleeing. Someone is pursuing him. How is this possible? He's the strongest sovereign under the 4 sovereigns of the laws. Who in this world can harm him, let alone kill him? Hearing Augusta's cry for help, the gods' jaws dropped, disbelief written all over their faces. They didn't dare to believe their ears and doubted everything they had just heard. The chief sovereign of fate, Orloff, suddenly frowned. He seemed to have sensed something, but before he could do anything, a dragon's roar reverberated through the sky. The next moment, Augusta let out a mournful howl. With a loud bang, Augusta's body exploded, his flesh and blood filling the air. What happened? No, impossible. How could Lord Augusta be like this? Apart from the 4 sovereigns of the laws, who else could harm the chief sovereign of light? Staring at the golden rain of blood and sensing the aura of light within it, the gods, high gods, and even sovereigns around the judgment dais all sucked in cold breaths of air. Their faces were filled with bewilderment, as though they had been struck by lightning. They looked like clay statues. Just as the gods were staring blankly into the sky, a dazzling golden light appeared in their field of vision, and a group of 4 slowly walked out from within the golden light. Guy, I'm still alive. I didn't expect to see you again. That's great. That's really great. Child, is this my child? I didn't expect him to have grown so big. The chief sovereign of light had died, and Lena had regained her memories. Upon seeing Hogg and Linley, her frail body trembled slightly. Lena, you've recovered. Staring at the 6 pairs of pure white wings which had vanished from Lena's back, Hogg immediately went to embrace her. Mother, Linley called out softly as he walked over as well. At this moment, The tens of thousands of gods on Tranquil Heart Island finally saw the appearance of Chu Bei's group. Who is he? Was he the one who killed the Lord Chief Sovereign of Light? I've never seen him before. Perhaps only those sovereigns know who he is. The owner of the All Heaven shop. No, impossible. What? He's the owner of the All Heaven shop who fled the trial. Wasn't he only a middle-rank lord? How could he have killed Lord Augusta? He was the most powerful expert beneath the chief sovereign of the edicts. Wrong. Something must be wrong. Either this Lord Chief Sovereign of Light is a fake, or this owner of the All Heaven shop isn't an intermediate sovereign at all. All of the gods, including the 10 chief sovereigns on the judgment dais, instantly had looks of astonishment on their faces. Luke, in particular, felt as though he had been struck by a bolt from the blue, or as though someone had poured a bucket of cold water over him from head to toe. His entire body was numb. It wasn't just him. Bloodridge, Redding Bell, and the others who had seen Chu Bei before all had dazed looks on their faces. They stared dumbfoundedly at Chu Bei, who stood there in midair. In the netherworld, they had personally witnessed Chu Bei kill Baal. Naturally, they had believed that Chu Bei was at the intermediate sovereign level. After all, there were simply too few chief sovereigns. This was why, upon learning that the 4 chief sovereigns of the edicts were about to intervene to put Chu Bei on trial, they had immediately hurried over, wanting to plead on his behalf. But who would have imagined that the owner of the All Heaven shop would actually appear after killing the chief sovereign of light, Augusta? Everything had happened so suddenly and unexpectedly that they were caught completely unprepared. Even now, their brains still hadn't reacted. This was simply too shocking. He was able to kill Augusta. Doesn't that mean he has the power to kill us as well? Doesn't that mean his strength is already on par with the 4 chief sovereigns of the edicts? On the judgment dais, the darkness chief sovereign, the fire chief sovereign, the wind chief sovereign, and the other chief sovereigns of the 6 elements looked at each other in dismay. Then, they stared vigilantly at Chu Bei. Their bodies were as tense as stone, and their hearts were as heavy as lead. My goodness. So the person who helped us modify the transportation portal is the owner of the All Heaven shop. Who would have thought that I'd already have a brush with the legendary owner of the All Heaven shop? But then again, why did he come to the netherworld? Some of the mid-gods from the netherworld reacted one after another. Clamor broke out from their mouths. Chapter 534. As you said, I really can't see through him. On the judgment platform, the Life Dominus carefully sized up Chu Bei in the sky. Her frown deepened as she looked at the Death Dominus. Previously, she had been skeptical of the Death Dominus's words, but now, she firmly believed them. I just don't know how the Light Dominus offended him. He's quite a pitiful person. The Death Dominus shook his head and sighed. The Light Dominus? The Life Dominus murmured. Then, as though she knew something, she subconsciously looked at the Fate Dominus. Just as she thought, Orloff's expression was extremely gloomy, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. The Destruction Dominus was silent, but from his expression, it was clear that he was also shocked by the previous scene. This is the place where you're going to judge me? In the sky, Chu Bei crossed his arms in front of his chest, looking down at the circular platform with a playful expression. As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Bei's gaze swept across the group of gods. Then he raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Rumble. Suddenly, the sky above Tranquil Heart Island thundered. In the next instant, the clear sky darkened. Dark clouds rolled, and thunder rumbled. Looking at the rapidly changing sky, the gods instantly revealed looks of astonishment. Compared to the mid-gods and high gods, the powerful sovereigns felt an inexplicable chill in their hearts when they looked at the dark clouds. But before they could carefully sense the source of this chill, rolling thunder and lightning intertwined. Then, accompanied by a resounding dragon's roar, the dense golden lightning intertwined to form a 5-clawed golden dragon. It bore a terrifying aura as it bore out of the dark clouds. When they sensed the monstrous aura of the 5-clawed golden lightning dragon, the group of gods instinctively gulped and stared with their eyes wide open. Rumble. amidst a deafening rumble, under everyone's shocked gazes, the 30,000-foot-long five-clawed brontosaurus seemed to have received Chu Bei's instructions. It opened its savage mouth and swooped down. In an instant, the five-clawed brontosaurus appeared above the judgment platform. Wherever it passed, thunder rumbled and thunder rumbled. Terrifying draconic aura filled the air. On Tranquil Heart Island, mountains collapsed one after another. In just a few seconds, the Tranquil Heart Island, which was as big as a continent, was turned into ruins. The chains that were originally binding the judgment platform also disappeared in the lightning. Bang! The five-clawed brontosaurus crashed into the courtroom. In an instant, the indestructible courtroom turned into a pile of rubble. After destroying the Tranquil Heart Island and the Master God's judgment platform, the five-clawed brontosaurus let out another dragon roar. Then, it soared into the sky and landed right under Chu Bei's feet. Its huge head turned, and its gaze swept across the gods who were watching the battle below. A terrifying aura filled the air. Could it be that the owner of the All-Heaven shop is related to the Dragon Clan? That makes sense. If he didn't have any connections, how could he have possibly slain Sovereign Godbar and saved the Four Divine Beasts clan? Even the ancestors of the Four Divine Beasts, the Azure Dragon, the Vermilion Bird, the White Tiger, and the Black Tortoise, were only lesser sovereigns. The owner of the All-Heaven shop, however, is an existence comparable to the chief sovereigns of the Four Edicts. In terms of seniority, doesn't that mean that he's even more senior than the ancestors of the Four Divine Beasts clan? Gazing at the enormous brontosaurus in the sky, the gods couldn't help but take a deep breath. They glanced in the direction of the Redding clan. Some of the weaker gods were so frightened by this draconic aura that their legs turned to jelly. It really is a power that surpasses ours. The chief sovereign of fire, the chief sovereign of darkness, the chief sovereign of wind, and the other elemental sovereigns stared at the five-clawed brontosaurus in the sky, their faces growing increasingly solemn. You've violated the rules we've set down. You've wantonly slaughtered lesser sovereigns, and you've even destroyed the judgment platform. This crime is unforgivable. You deserve death. Just as everyone was stunned by Chu Bei's methods, an icy, emotionless, powerful voice drifted through the sky, seeming to ring out directly in everyone's minds. Is Lord Orloff going to intervene? According to rumors, Lord Orloff is the most mysterious and most powerful of the chief sovereigns of the Four Edicts. Even the chief sovereign of destruction is no match for him. With Lord Orloff intervening, the owner of the All-Heaven shop is in danger. Only, even now, we still don't know where the owner of the All-Heaven shop came from. He's far too mysterious. It's like he appeared out of thin air. After recognizing the voice of the chief sovereign of fate, countless gazes fell upon Orloff. His black robes fluttered as he flew into the sky, instantly facing off against Chu Bei. Judgment is a prelude. You're here to avenge Augusta, aren't you? Chu Bei looked at Orloff with an amused look on his face, then reached out and pointed at the chief sovereign of death, the chief sovereign of life, and the chief sovereign of destruction. In terms of power, you are indeed much more powerful than the three of them. Augusta? I don't have any dealings with him. Orloff frowned and said in a low voice, Have you forgotten that you were once one with Augusta? Chu Bei laughed. How did you know? Upon hearing Chu Bei's words, the chief sovereign of fate's aura clearly began to ripple, and the killing intent emanating from his body grew even more intense. As I thought. The distant chief sovereign of life let out a long sigh. Big sister, what exactly is going on? The chief sovereign of death and the chief sovereign of destruction both looked towards the chief sovereign of life, confusion in their eyes. The chief sovereign of life stared at Orloff. There is a race in this world. They are the Beulah race. This race has very few members. Although their physical defenses are far inferior to the four divine beasts, the Dark Rock, and the other sovereign divine beasts, they are able to split their bodies. However, they can split their souls into two and not interfere with each other. If my guess is correct, Orloff expelled his evil, greedy, and other negative emotions into his second soul, which is the so-called Augusta. Without any negative emotions, Orloff ignored worldly affairs and focused on his research. From then on, he became the most powerful of the four of us. Can it be that the chief sovereign of fate and the deceased chief sovereign of light, Augusta, are the same person? Is this for real? That's impossible. Good heavens! This is simply inconceivable. The chief sovereign of the elemental gods and the other sovereigns came to their senses as well. All of them began to size up the chief sovereign of fate in astonishment, as though this was the first time they had met him. Forget it. There's no need to hide it anymore. Since that's the case, then I'll use the excuse of avenging Augusta to kill you. The chief sovereign of fate let out a gloomy sigh, and then he punched towards the empty space next to him. The empty space shattered, and an ancient armor and a blue long sword appeared from within a pitch-black hole. Swish, swish. The ancient armor and the long sword flew out amidst the piercing sounds of the air being torn apart. The former perfectly fit Orloff's body, enveloping him from all sides. The latter, with a clear ringing sound, landed in Orloff's hands. Not only that, but at virtually the same time, the ring on Orloff's left middle finger began to emit a dazzling light. Three overgod artifacts. This old bastard hid his treasures far too well. Right. Everyone thought that he only had a single soul-protecting overgod artifact. Who would have thought that he had an offensive-type overgod artifact, as well as a physical defensive armor? Sensing the ripples of energy emanating from Orloff's ring, sword, and armor, the chief sovereign of life, the chief sovereign of death, and the chief sovereign of destruction revealed looks of surprise. What? 3 overgod artifacts? Hearing the words of the 3 chief sovereigns of the edicts, the gazes of the sovereigns and high gods all focused on Orloff's armor, longsword, and ring. Looks of astonishment were on their faces. Overgod artifacts, as the name implied, were divine artifacts forged by the overgods. They possessed unparalleled power. The reason why there was such an insurmountable gulf between the chief sovereigns of the edicts and the chief sovereigns of the elemental gods was because the former had overgod artifacts. If one wanted to acquire an overgod artifact, one had to complete an overgod mission issued by the overgods. In the past trillion years, the overgod missions had been issued a total of 6 times. On the surface, all the gods knew that each of the 4 chief sovereigns of the edicts had completed a mission and received an overgod artifact from the overgods. As for the other 2 missions, that had always been a mystery. But now, it seemed that the person who had completed those 2 missions was actually the chief sovereign of fate, Orloff. They truly couldn't imagine how powerful Orloff, who had 3 overgod artifacts, soul defense, physical defense, and offensive power, had become. Perhaps he's already comparable to the legendary, ethereal overgods. He truly deserves to be known as the number 1 person beneath the overgods. The gods all stared at Orloff, stunned. Benefactor. Will he be a match for the chief sovereign of fate? Reading Bell looked at the Bloodridge sovereign, a look of worry on his face. Difficult. The Bloodridge sovereign shook his head. Forget about the fact that the chief sovereign of fate had 3 overgod artifacts on him. Even if he didn't, he would most likely be more powerful than the master of the all-heavens shop. Not bad. You'll be able to give me a bit of exercise. Chu Bei looked at Orloff with amusement, not a hint of fear on his face. You really think too highly of yourself. Orloff's gaze was cold and sinister, and a murderous aura, so thick and solid, shot towards Chu Bei. Crackle. Chu Bei's eyes flashed. That murderous aura, so thick and solid, shattered when it was still 100 meters away from him. And then, Chu Bei's right hand danced, chopping through the air. At virtually the same time, the 30,000-meter-tall brontosaurus beneath his feet rapidly shrank, transforming into a bolt of lightning. A draconic roar rang out, and the finger-thick bolt of lightning, which had been condensed to the limit, flashed out. Space itself seemed to have been sliced apart, and a long, pitch-black hole appeared in it. The spectating gods, including the chief sovereign of destruction, the chief sovereign of life, and the chief sovereign of death, didn't even have a chance to use their divine senses to clearly see what was going on. Clang! The clear sound of metal striking metal rang out. In the next instant, the skies shattered. The hearts of the tens of thousands of gods trembled. For a brief moment, they felt as though their bodies no longer belonged to them. Orloff didn't try to block it all. He was incomparably confident in the overgod armor he was wearing. But just as that bolt of lightning struck his armor, his face changed. His smile instantly vanished, replaced by a look of agony. That twisted look on his face was like that of an ordinary person who had just been struck by a 1,000-pound hammer. Slash! The terrifying impact caused Orloff to stumble back several steps, and he spat out a mouthful of golden blood. He then looked at the part of his armor that had been struck by the bolt of lightning. A thumb-sized hole had appeared there. Chapter 535. What? The battle has just begun, but Lord Orloff is already vomiting blood? How can this be? Isn't that armor Lord Orloff is wearing an overgod artifact? How could he be injured? Seeing Orloff vomit golden blood, the faces of the tens of thousands of gods changed dramatically. They exchanged glances, their eyes filled with disbelief. Has the owner of the all-heaven shop already become this powerful? The chief sovereigns of destruction, life, and fire couldn't help but cry out in shock. They truly couldn't believe what they had just seen. Impossible. The one whose heart was pounding the most was none other than the chief sovereign of fate, Orloff. His cold eyes stared fixedly at Chu Bei. The armor covering his body emanated a black light. He simply couldn't accept that his overgod artifact had been pierced through by Chu Bei. Now do you think I'm qualified to use you as a warm-up exercise? Chu Bei looked calmly at Orloff, a hint of a smile in his voice. It seems I've truly underestimated you. When he thought of the power contained within that lightning, Orloff's face grew even more solemn, and he began to grow solemn. The tens of thousands of spectating gods seemed to sense the change in the atmosphere of the battlefield. All of them fell silent, their gazes constantly shifting between the two figures facing each other. Crackle, crackle. As Orloff's icy voice rang out, a resplendent golden light spread out from him, instantly enveloping the entire celestial realm. Augusta's existence is so that I can be unaffected by the conflicts of the mortal world, so that I can wholeheartedly pursue the path of cultivation. I can't even remember how many tens of millions of years it has been since I was injured. In order to show you the damage you've done to me, I will use my newly developed, powerful technique to kill you. Orloff strode towards Chu Bei. With every step he took, the skies of the celestial realm seemed to tremble, as though they were being locked down. Sounds rather interesting. I'm rather interested. Make your move. As he watched Orloff draw closer and closer, Chu Bei's expression didn't change in the slightest. A smile remained on his lips. Hearing Chu Bei's words, Orloff stared at Chu Bei with an increasingly cold gaze. With a cold snort, Orloff gripped the hilt of his long sword with both hands. The sword hummed, and the sharp sword light caused the surrounding chaotic space to shatter. The gods watching from below all sucked in a cold breath of air. They knew that this long sword represented an offensive type overgod artifact. Fortunately, Orloff had stepped into the chaotic streams of space before attacking, treating that place as his new battlefield. Rumble. The heaven realm rumbled as the boundless, resplendent golden light instantly retracted. It appeared in the new battlefield along with Orloff and fused into his body. In a split second, the gods who were still watching the battle in the celestial realm felt as if a vacuum had appeared in the surrounding 500 kilometers. There wasn't even a trace of energy flow. Dark rock tin swords. A strange, deep voice rang out from Orloff's mouth. It was also at this moment that the expressions of the Death Dominus, the Life Dominus, and the Elemental Dominus all changed. They all looked at the Destruction Dominus in unison. The one with the ugliest expression was none other than the Destruction Dominus. No matter what, he never would have imagined that Orloff's research on killing techniques would involve him. Within the chaotic streams of space, an enormous figure appeared in front of the long sword that Orloff was wielding. It was 30,000 meters long. This was an enormous, coiling, snake-like monster. One could faintly see that its body was covered in black scales, and it had sharp claws that gleamed with cold light. The most eye-catching part of it was its enormous, symmetrical wings. Isn't that the Destruction Dominus' true form? Heavens! The Fate Dominus is actually developing the Destruction Dominus killing technique. Based on what I know, the Destruction Dominus has only used the Dark Rock 7 swords. Lord Orloff is actually using 3 more swords. Upon seeing the enormous creature that Orloff had created from the tip of his sword, the sovereigns came to their senses and cried out in surprise. At a glance, whether it was its scales, claws, or wings, they all seemed to be made of black steel. The strangest thing was that one of its eyes was white, while the other was red. After my battle with Woedard, I spent 100,000 years experimenting with this technique before finally developing it. Its innate divine ability is the Dark Rock's 7 swords, but I added 3 more swords to its 7 swords. At this point, Orloff paused for a moment, his gaze still locked onto Chu Bei. His voice grew deeper and deeper. Ever since I developed this killing technique, I've never used it in battle. Today, I'll sacrifice you to my sword. As soon as he finished speaking, Orloff brandished his sword with both hands, and the enormous dark rock in front of him began to move as well. With a buzzing sound, the dark rock split into tin. Behind them, trillions of sword shadows followed, enveloping the chaotic streams of space. Swish! The first dark rock swung its black-scaled tail, carrying trillions of sword shadows with it. Like a flood, it covered the area where Chu Bei was. Before anyone could react, the second dark rock transformed into a sky-piercing streak of sword light that chopped downwards. Immediately afterwards, a third, a fourth, a fifth. With each swing of Orloff's sword, a dark rock would charge towards Chu Bei. Rumble. The battlefield rumbled as it began to collapse. The area where Chu Bei had just been was now enveloped by an enormous sphere of black light. 10 dark rocks swam about on the surface of the sphere, their savage, bloody mouths constantly spitting out terrifying streaks of sword light. An aura of apocalypse poured into the sphere of black light. Chop! Orloff gripped his sword with both hands and chopped downwards. In the instant that he spat out a single word, the 10 dark rock simultaneously transformed into sword shadows that glowed with dazzling light as they chopped down from different directions. Boom! The sphere of black light exploded, and the battlefield within 100 million kilometers trembled violently before collapsing. At this moment, terrifying streams of chaotic space rampaged through the battlefield, ripping apart the barriers of tens of thousands of material planes. Even the celestial realm, one of the 4 higher planes, was no exception. The faces of the gods all paled as the space around them was instantly frozen, rendering them completely immobile. What a terrifying madman! The chief sovereign of destruction stared at the crumbling gray battlefield and sucked in a deep breath of cold air. He was clearly the true body of the Dark Rock, but Orloff's attack was actually far superior to his. What a great irony! What a terrifying attack! As expected of the chief sovereign of the 4 edicts. Speaking of which, is the battle over? Is the owner of the all-heavens shop dead? The gods all frowned as they stared blankly at the crumbling battlefield. But because of the gray streams of chaotic space, they were unable to clearly see Chu Bei's condition. Disperse. We can see now. Heavens! He's actually fine under that attack? How is this possible? Could it be that the owner of the all-heaven shop also has a defensive overgod artifact? A moment later, the streams of chaotic space dissipated, and the tens of thousands of gods were able to clearly see the battlefield once more. Their expressions froze, and their bodies went numb. Terrifying streaks of sword light continued to wreak havoc where the black sphere of light had exploded, constantly tearing apart the crumbling void. However, the owner of the all-heavens shop, who had been at the center of the explosion, was completely unharmed. It was as if the Dark Rock 10 swords didn't exist to him at all. In front of him, an iron lump was spinning. Although it wasn't large, it was actually able to devour the berserk streaks of sword light as it opened its mouth. From its expression, it seemed to be enjoying it, as if the sword lights were its food. Truly inconceivable. The life god stared at the figure on the battlefield in a daze. This was a result she hadn't expected. On the other hand, the death god's expression didn't change much, as if everything was within her expectations. It's truly hard to imagine that his lordship has already become so powerful, Hogg muttered to himself. He could still vaguely remember the scene when the owner of the All-Heaven shop had first appeared in Wuzhen. At that time, he had thought that his lordship was merely a saint-level expert. Who would have thought that he was already in existence on the same level as the chief sovereigns of the Four Edicts? In fact, he might even be above them. Was that the killing move you developed just now? It's not powerful enough. Chu Bei's lips curled into a smile. With a wave of his right hand, the surrounding spatial turbulence and sharp sword lights quickly dissipated. Orloff was silent, still tightly gripping his sword with both hands. However, his face was no longer as calm as before. Instead, it was incomparably solemn, and his eyes were filled with vigilance. The dark rock tin swords was indeed his strongest move. However, he had never expected that even his strongest killing move wouldn't be able to harm the owner of the All-Heaven shop in the slightest. Moreover, from the other party's calm and composed appearance, it was clear that he didn't care about his strongest killing move at all. Then it's this seat's turn to attack. As his mocking voice fell, the iron lump in front of Chu Bei trembled, immediately creating a giant elephant that shook the 9 heavens. At the same time, the 5-clawed golden dragon above Chu Bei continued to expand, soon covering the sky. The sound of the great Tao, wind rising, clouds moving, lightning falling. In an instant, the weather of the entire celestial realm changed. Dark clouds gathered and thunder rumbled. Controlling the weather is the innate ability of our Azure Dragon clan. However, we can only control a region, but our benefactor can actually change the weather of the entire celestial realm with a single thought. Could it be that His Excellency is really our ancestor? Looking at the changing sky, Reading Bell and the other experts of the clan were all shocked. They looked at each other, then looked at Chu Bei with even more reverence. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Amidst the rumbling, Chu Bei put his hands behind his back and merged with the iron lump, standing above the 5-clawed golden dragon's head. As he casually raised his hand, accompanied by a long and continuous dragon roar, the 5-clawed golden dragon opened its savage maw and inhaled. In an instant, the boundless spatial turbulence and spatial energy in the void battleground condensed into the golden dragon's mouth, rapidly compressing into a beam of light. Whoosh! The beam of light shot out, heading straight for Orloff. Sensing the terrifying aura coming at him, Orloff's pupils constricted. He wanted to flee, but his body seemed to be bound by an irresistible force, unable to move. No, no. Finally, Orloff sensed death approaching. Fear surged in his eyes as he instinctively cried out, "You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories."